All out, pull up, put the whole conference in the doghouse. Leave them 6 feet, see me on the win streak. All-star status, go coach and the bench deep. Offense on 10, how we run it? Your best ain't nothing, we gon' send them boys punting. Black and red, got them dead on arrival. Defense hunker down for the tie. Hey, you don't want it with the dogs. Film guy on it, you don't want it with my dog. Break it down, play by play, that's the day-to-day. They know we ain't come to play, boy, it's UGA. Kirby smart, I cannot play the fool. Back to back, we did not come to lose. Back to back like we got something to prove. Pay your dues, dog nation on the move. What's up?
We doing a little bit different around here.
We ain't come to play, we ain't come to play. Shut up and grind the tape.
The tape.
We ain't come to play, we ain't come to play. Them dogs in your face.
Let's grind.
We ain't come to play, we ain't come to play. Shut up and grind the tape.
Shut up. Let's grind.
We ain't come to play, we ain't come to play. Them dogs in your face. Shut up and grind.
Let's grind.
Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape.
The
Shut up
tape.
and grind.
Let's grind.
Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Shut up and grind. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape. Shut up and grind. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro. Grind the tape, bro.
Shut up. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to MBR, or as we like to call it around here, Nothing But Rants, the show where I find topics that I'm oddly passionate about and I pontificate upon them. These are not hot takes, but rather takes that I'm hot about. What's up? You really like that? Let's shut up and grind some tape.
Oh my goodness. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in Film Guy Network history, I have been graced with the honor of opening this show. Brooks isn't here, which means I'm not going to do the, what is up, ladies and gentlemen? That's his thing. If you didn't watch Tuesday's show, you probably noticed that Boss Man's not here right now. If you're wondering why, it's because he has gone out on a journey to expand his football knowledge to parts unknown. He didn't even tell us where he's going.
I have no idea where he is. He might be out of the country for all I know.
He could be in Winnipeg. He could be on the other side of the country. He could be upstairs. He didn't tell us. All I know is that we're running the show tonight. So since Brooks isn't here, I figured we start the night off with one of his favorite games. Before we do that, though, JWill, how you doing, brother?
Oh, dude, I'm doing fantastic. I mean, it's been a bit of a busy day. Since Brooks is not around, I was the one that got to go to practice availability today, so excited to bring those notes during the local hour. But, I mean, it's been a minute since we've gotten to do one of these. I want to say it was off-season sometime last year, maybe during a spring tour, so it's not often that the two producers get to play around a little bit.
It's a unique feeling. It's definitely quieter in the studio, but I'm very excited this opportunity, and more time for us to talk. We've got Brooks isn't here, so not that I enjoy him being gone, but there's more time for just you and I to banter. So the first thing I want to get into is Greg Says season.
Ooh.
Greg Says season is upon us once again, and frankly, you could play this game any single day you want. The topic today is Greg McElroy says this team can be very dangerous.
Oh, I feel like this is already going to be one of those takes where Greg does where he gives us a take, but he's also not really giving us a take at the same time. Like maybe just throw a team out there. But I do have a couple of guesses here. My first one. Is it Penn State? Returning quarterback Drew Aller, got some other key guys coming back as well. They almost made it to the national championship game last year. Is it Penn State?
Penn State's a very interesting one, and I see why you're thinking that, but I think Penn State is also one of these teams now, given what they did last season. They've kind of elevated themselves into this national championship contender category, so they're not really dangerous anymore, in my opinion. They're just more one of these top-tier teams. So, no, it is not Penn State.
Okay, what about the Auburn Tigers? Kind of a team that nobody really knows what to do with. They got Jackson Arnold in at quarterback this year. Maybe they can figure something out offensively as long as they're not throwing 18 interceptions a game because they're running RPO 40% of the time. I feel like they got some good pieces coming in, had a really strong recruiting class. Is it the Auburn Tigers?
You're getting a lot closer with Auburn. It's kind of in that realm of teams that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be these top-tier contender teams, but still ones you never want to take too lightly. But it is not Auburn.
Okay, what about a team like Texas A&M? Marcel Reed, they were a little fun last year. Very up and down a little bit, but I could see them being dangerous with Mike Elko in year 2.
You're getting very close now, but it is not Texas A&M. Do you give up or you got any more?
I got one more, but I already know it's not going to be right considering what you've said I've been warm on. But I want to throw this answer out there because I think this just kind of fit into this mold. What about Georgia Tech? Haynes King coming back. They gave a lot of teams fits last year, almost upset 2 top 5 teams.
I mean, hell, they proved to be dangerous last year. They knocked off Miami, and frankly, you could make the argument they should have knocked off Georgia. A couple of things don't go their way. But it is not Georgia Tech. Greg McElroy said, and I quote, "I think Florida is an extremely dangerous team." Now, my favorite part of this is if you keep reading, and he goes into it, he explains, DJ Lagway made some steps last year to kind of show things, and then he hits it with this caveat. If they can figure out wide receiver, if they can make some improvements defensively, if the offensive line can gel, Florida can be an extremely dangerous team. So what Greg McElroy says is that if 75% of their team gets better or they can figure things out, Florida's going to be an extremely dangerous team. Now, I don't think that's too outlandish of a take. Florida has been kind of this under the radar, hey, sleeping giant type team, don't let them get hot. And especially last year after the way they finished the 2024 season, they're definitely a team to look out for. That schedule is going to be tough though. But the fact that that schedule is so tough, there's that many more opportunities for you to upset, one of these big teams and be quote unquote dangerous.
Yeah, so basically he said Florida's got one position out of 22 figured out, and if they can figure out the other 21,
pretty much,
they might be really dangerous. Now, I think they have kind of figured out some things at wide receiver. They've got some good pieces coming in. They've also got some returners coming back at that position that were really solid for them last year, Trey Wilson being one of them. So I think they have kind of addressed that issue there. Defensively, I feel like they're always fundamentally sound, but they're kind of just spurts where they're pretty bad, or they're giving up gashes, or maybe there's an entire Saturday like they were against Miami last year where they just couldn't stop a nosebleed. I think there's too many moments like that for Florida, but if DJ Lagway is as special as many expect him to be, then I think the ceiling is the limit, or there really is no ceiling maybe on this football team because a great quarterback can take you the distance sometimes. But I do think there are still quite a few questions on that roster. You hit the nail on the head too with the schedule. It's a brutal schedule. I mean, if you make it out of there, then you got to go and play a playoff, and who knows what that looks like for them. And that's a team, too, has no playoff experience whatsoever. Billy Napier has no postseason experience either. And we've kind of seen that show up over the past couple of seasons as well with some of these head coaches. So I think they definitely can be dangerous. But then we're also hearing stuff like DJ Lagway's dealing with a shoulder injury at practice. I don't even know what that's about. So that kind of scares me a little bit. Something that, like, last year was the hamstring that kept him out of football games that he injured against Georgia. And now there's this shoulder injury that's happening where he's kind of limited at practice. And I believe it's something that happened last year that maybe just hasn't gotten fixed. I don't know. That kind of scares me a little bit.
It is nice, though, because as hard as the schedule is, we talked about it, it is set up in a way for them to kind of get the ball rolling. And they could honestly be one of these teams that to the first 25%, first third of the season, people go like, hey, Florida's a legit team this year. You open against LIU, automatic win. Then you have USF. Kind of a tricky game. USF has given teams problems. They gave Bama a fit 2 years ago, but still should be a very winnable game. Then it's LSU at LSU. You could probably, that could be a win for you. And if you win that game, things are going to be going very well. Miami, you'd have to assume by week 4, they're still a top 25 team, barring them suffering.
I'm getting a call from the boss man right now.
Ooh.
Hello.
Great show. I'll be watching from a distance. Bye.
Thank you. There you go. Boss man saying we're doing a great job, and he hopes that we have a great show.
He's always watching.
Always checking in, always keeping tabs on us. Love that he knows. He knew exactly what was happening. 8 o'clock. Boys are live right now, handling business. He's handling business, so always love a good check-in.
You didn't ask him where he was?
No, I didn't. I don't know, man.
Did he give any hints? Did it sound like it was windy or raining, or maybe like?
I did hear some wind in the background, but could just be got the windows rolled down. Maybe some nice weather where he's at. Could be in the car. I don't know.
Guess in chat where Brooks is, because we genuinely do not know. But moving on to this Florida thing, you could be 4-0 with 2 top 25 wins as the season starts, and obviously it gets rolling from there. But yeah, I get why Greg McElroy is saying this, because yeah, you're playing Tennessee, you're playing Georgia, you're playing Texas A&M, you're playing Texas. Those are all teams that are going to be very tough games to win. But at the same point, you'd have to imagine they're not going to go 0-4 on that. Like, this team has taken too many strides, in my opinion, for them to lose every single one of those games. Like, even if you go 1-3 in that, you're an extremely dangerous team for that. We saw last year, even when DJ Lagway wasn't playing, they gave Georgia a 3.5 quarter battle. So Florida is absolutely one of these dangerous teams this year. I'm not ready to mark them as hey, get ready, they're going to take over the SEC, or they're taking that next step, but they're more than dangerous.
Yeah, and two, like, again, I feel like there still is maybe this learning curve that Billy Napier hasn't quite had to go against in his coaching career, because they kind of just been a middle-of-the-pack team since he got there, really trying to build up the roster and get his team ready to make this sort of leap. But I just think that he's never been in these tight game situations against top 5 opponents or even top 10 opponents, especially like late in the season where Florida is still in contention for a playoff spot. You got to deliver. That's something he hasn't gone against, so I'm interested to see, like, if Florida does turn into that this year, is he a head coach that can answer those questions without having really any experience against it?
Yeah, I mean, the important thing I think for Florida is going to be tapering expectations. If you had a good season last year by all standards, I mean, we thought Billy Napier would be fired this time last year, so things have gone well this year. Don't make the expectations too high, but I do think one coach who is kind of not doing a good job at that is Matt Rhule. Matt Rhule had an interview today, media availability, talked about how, a lot of the overturn, talk about how weird things are for being, this is one of his first springs ever where you're not going towards that spring game. It's kind of just you have your practices and ends. But he dropped this quote that I think is kind of alarming in a way.
Oh, an alarming one from Matt Rhule. Usually I like Matt Rhule because he's brutally honest, but was he a little too honest this time?
Well, it's not even brutally too honest. It's one sentence, and it's this. We've always kind of built towards year 3. He's, of course, entering his 3rd year at Nebraska, and I don't understand why you would say that right now. We're talking about how you came into 2024, things were fairly disappointing under Dylan Raiola. Yeah, he's a freshman, but he was a 5-star. He's one of the number 1 quarterbacks in the class. He was supposed to be better than he was, even if he was young. So now you've kind of put all your chips into where, hey, year 3 is the year we start making shit happen, where I don't know why you would tell people that.
Yeah, and it kind of took me back to Shane Beamer's quote last year during SEC Media Days, where he was kind of giving the media crap for, I know you guys expect us to finish 4th to last in the SEC or whatever it was, but we around here expect to make the college football playoffs. Like, that's our standard here. And now he almost did that, and he almost accomplished that and exceeded anybody's expectations of his program. But kind of our whole point around that was, why are you doing this to yourself when, one, there's kind of a question mark by your name right now as South Carolina's head coach? Like, you really haven't proven anything, and it looks like when your program's going to take a jump, you take a step back. They took a step forward this year, but again, I feel like it's so unnecessary to put these types of expectations on your program when really there's no signs of it other than, hey, we've got Dylan Raiola back for year 2. Hey, we also brought in Dane Key at wide receiver, which is something they've been lacking offensively, is they really don't have any difference makers. Maybe the guy out of Kentucky can finally be one of these difference makers for us, and he better be, because I can assure you it probably cost a pretty penny to get him out of the portal. So it seems like they're trying, and we do have a year 3 rule around here where that's like the line of judgment. So this is a big judgment year for Matt Rhule, but again, putting those expectations on yourself, I don't know why we're doing that.
And it's not, and to his credit, he didn't say like year 3 is the year we should be competing for Big Ten championships or the playoff, or like he just said year 3 should be when it all comes together. And I mean, you look at this schedule and you could make the argument that, yeah, absolutely, they should have their best year into year 3. Their only 2 ranked games are Michigan in Lincoln, and then they play Penn State in Pennsylvania. So I get why you're saying that, but it just doesn't make sense for me to come off of a year where a consistency, not even this is Matt Rhule's problem. Nebraska has for the last 6 or 7 years always done a great job of losing games that they shouldn't be losing.
And I will give Matt Rhule credit for this, because everything about the roster does say that he's kind of been setting himself up to have one of these jumps in year 3 of, we're going to have Dylan Raiola entering his 2nd year, and then you go and get a wide receiver out of the portal, a top name that a lot of people were after, names like Georgia. You were bidding against guys like that. And then you also go and get Williams Winery, the Missouri guy who was a freshman last year, played in a few games, then called it quits and redshirted. So you got 2 big names out of the transfer portal, which tells me if you're trying to do that, if you're buying stock into guys like that from the transfer portal, then that kind of means that you feel like your window to win right now is maybe this next year or even next year. Because again, Williams Ranieri is still very young in his college career. Dylan Raiola at least has one more year after this as well. But it seems like he's kind of saying this is the year we're going to see some major differences.
So what would you expect? What would you say is the baseline of a successful season for Nebraska then? Just like if you hit this, you did a good job this year.
I would say probably winning 9 games. Like if we can have a 9-3 record and we can avoid some of these inexcusable losses, or what I would deem inexcusable losses, where Nebraska looks like they are competitive, they're one of the better teams in the Big Ten, but then we also go and lay an egg at time. Like I feel like that's kind of been Nebraska in a nutshell over the last couple of years, is there's really no consistency around that program. And even at the beginning of the season, it was Dylan Raiola looks really good as a true freshman, and then it kind of teetered off there at the end. He didn't exactly put up any star lining numbers by any means, but again, that's a true freshman starting for you. So I think if they can do something like 9-3, where maybe it is a conversation of Nebraska's kind of flirting with that line of maybe being a college football playoff team, but they're not quite there yet, I would say that's successful, because now it seems like we're entering a new realm of discussion when it comes to Nebraska entering in 2026 of these guys were borderline competitors last year. This season, it really seems like they're setting themselves up to be that.
I put the success baseline for Nebraska is forget records, forget, numbers, metrics, all that. Obviously, you don't want to go 4-8. Obviously, a poor record is bad, but as long as you kind of kill this Nebraska of old mentality where we just talked about it, it seems like for the last 7 or 8 years, there's always been a moment where Nebraska's like, hey, they're beating this team. They're in the lead here. They might upset so-and-so. And they have always found a way to lose. I think they're winless in the last 30 games against top 25 opponents. Things like that where they're always so close and they always find a way to squander it at the end. If you can get rid of that, I don't care if you go 8-4. I don't care if you go 7-5. If you lose the games you're supposed to lose and win the games you're supposed to win, that's all you really need from me. I think that Nebraska is one of these slow-burning teams. It's a fairly patient fan base. It's not a, hey, where's our national title? They've been loyal. They've been waiting for a long time. I don't think they're going to mind to wait a little longer, so as long as you are showing the improvements.
One of the few fan bases I would say of they had a lot of success in the earlier years of college football, like back in the 90s and that type of era. And then they've kind of hit this long lull of just kind of mediocrity, I would say, where Nebraska's really not a major threat to anybody. And maybe it is because we live in the Southeast and we are in Big Ten country, but kind of one of the few fan bases where they're not constantly throwing it in your face of, oh, we're coming back. Like this is the year we're going to be back this year. Kind of like what Texas was doing during the years that they were just an okay football team. We're like, we're finally back. Sam Ehlinger bringing the boys back. Like they haven't really done much of that, but I will say it does seem like the fan base's expectations are starting to rise a little bit. Not saying like the temperature of Matt Rhule's seat by any means is getting any hotter, because I think Matt Rhule's doing a good job there. He does and says all the right things, but it does seem like maybe the patience is dwindling just a little bit now.
Now, the benefit of having this is that you have 2 opportunities. I think as long as you get that top 25, when you get a major upset, you play Michigan at home and you play Penn State in Happy Valley. Now, that's a big ask, but if you can pull that off, you can go 1-11, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if you can just lose maybe one game leading into that Penn State game, but I mean, schedule definitely seems manageable.
Yeah,
definitely seems like a winnable year.
Other than Michigan, USC, which we have no idea what that is, and then Penn State, like there's Iowa, there's most of these games you should be competing in. Speaking of USC, that's an interesting one to talk about. What do you think success means for them? Because I have 2 alleyways that I think you can go down for a successful season for USC.
Man, I'll tell you what, USC has kind of become one of these teams where I don't know what success looks like for this team anymore. Because it seems like there's kind of been expectations placed on them several times over the years, and they made I don't know. I truly have no idea. And it seems like when they get into these positions where they played Alabama a while back, and they just get the doors blown off of them, that kind of felt like an end and a smack in the face to what maybe the resurgence of the USC Trojans was going to be. And then you go and hire Lincoln Riley. Seems like a home run hire, like at the time a top 5 head coach in college football.
Championship.
Yeah, took you to the Pac-12 championship. You're continuing to get these blue chip quarterbacks to come into your program. Now there's no more blue chip quarterbacks really on your roster. I mean, it looks like you're going to be riding with Mayava this year. No idea what that's going to look like. It looked pretty good last year in the times that he got to play, but there's really been no improvements on the defensive side of the football, even though there have been efforts on the recruiting trail to try and beef up that roster defensively. I just feel like I don't have an expectation for USC to be one of these better or like top tier Big Ten teams. And that's the problem, is they're not playoff caliber, but they shouldn't be a mid-tier Big Ten team either. Like, that brand should never be thrown in the midst of, well, I guess they're as good as Illinois this year. Like, that should never be the case for USC, but it continues to be that. And this Lincoln Riley hire appears to be just like going nowhere. Like, it's just kind of plateaued, like flatlining. Hey, bowl eligibility this year, boys. Like, let's get after it.
The weirdest thing about USC last year for me was I felt like they turned a corner. They came out, Miller Moss, who was not, the typical Lincoln Riley quarterback. He wasn't elite, didn't light it up, played really solid football against LSU. The defense looked really good. And it was kind of like, okay, they're 1-0 here. They go into Michigan and they pushed them around for 4 quarters, and then you let off a 65-yard run to lose that game. And everything just kind of slid downhill from there. And it felt like they were just this close to maybe turning a corner as USC program. And now, obviously, you're at a spot where the future looks very bleak for Lincoln Riley. So I think success can be painted in 2 ways. You can look at it one way of Lincoln Riley's here to stay. We need him to have a really, really good season. We need a 9-3, hey, maybe we're a playoff talk team, like kind of what South Carolina and Alabama were last year. One of these teams where it's like, yeah, they've lost some games. Yeah, they've had some really bad moments, but they're dangerous. You can be that. Or if you're one of the fan base that think Lincoln Riley is a sitting duck, we need him out of here, we need to move on from this, you need to have as bad of a season as you can to get him out of there. That would also be successful for you. So it's kind of this opposite sides. I don't think playoffs are in the realm of expectations right now, which is unfortunate because that's exactly why Lincoln Riley was brought here. And we thought, the 12-team playoff was going to benefit teams like USC and all them that kind of hang out in the top 7 to 8, but never really get to the top 4. We thought this is perfect for them, and they've continuously taken steps back.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think that this offseason, like, a red flag was thrown up about the Lincoln Riley experiment this offseason, because it almost feels like Lincoln Riley has now lost his fastball of like what makes him a great head coach. Of you were going to land Juju Lewis, and then he decommits, and now he's going to Colorado. So like now even the thing that everybody clamors about Lincoln Riley for, of always getting a 5-star quarterback or getting one of the top end names in every single quarterback class, he didn't even do that this year. Now he did get Hassan Longstreet, which is a good pickup for them, and I'm sure that Lincoln Riley is going to help his game and help him develop, and hopefully he turns into something for them. But when Lincoln Riley isn't doing what Lincoln Riley typically does, it almost puts into question of like, what's going on here? Like, has Lincoln Riley like lost his touch as a head coach? Like, I don't know. Very interesting to me.
Lincoln Riley with a bad quarterback is like Kirby Smart with a bottom 100 defense.
Oh, yeah, well,
that's what it feels like, in my opinion. Moving on, I think these two teams crossed paths last year and kind of went in different ways. LSU, I think, is another team where success is kind of interesting for them because fans want a playoff appearance. Fans feel like they should be going to a playoff appearance, and it's not a lofty expectation for them, but is it a fair one? Would that be the baseline for success?
I'm not gonna lie, I missed what team you said.
LSU.
LSU. All right. LSU is it kind of does. I hate saying like playoff or bust for teams, but I feel like we can be comfortable with saying that now because it is a 12-team playoff field. Like, there's no longer just 4 teams, a tight squeeze there at the end of the year where you're trying to like muscle your way in if you're a team like LSU. But now that we got 12 teams in the mix, you're returning a starting quarterback, where that's not really something that's happening a lot going into this next season for a lot of SEC teams. There's a lot of teams bringing in new arms. So Garrett Nussmeier, a returning starter for LSU, and a guy that has to elevate his game. We talk about it all the time. We can't be heart rate monitor Garrett Nussmeier anymore. We can't be throwing an interception one play and then throwing a beam for 70 yards for a touchdown. Like, we just got to be constant, and we can't be having these huge mistakes like he had last year. So if he can take a step forward, and then, but maybe even the biggest thing, maybe even bigger than Garrett Nussmeier taking steps forward, is the defense. I mean, the defense for the last couple of years is just not putrid, but it's just been very inconsistent. Like, Harold Perkins, his freshman year, looked like the next biggest star defensively in college football, and that hasn't
for another year now.
And now he's back for another year. He hasn't really evolved into that, and you can say it's because of position changes or how they're using him, injuries. But you have to get him back to a point where he is impacting football games every single play and really bringing that defense together. And I think if you can find consistency on the defensive side of the football, and you can get some improvement from Garrett Nussmeier, I think they'll be in good shape. But again, like other things that we mentioned about this team is they're not recruiting defensive backs or getting big names in the defensive back room like they typically have in years prior. The wide receiver room this year doesn't have that headlining name like it always has for LSU. And the run game, that's been super inconsistent for them as well. So there's a lot of things that have to go right for them this year to be a playoff team. But it's Brian Kelly, who many claim is one of the better coaches in college football, and your LSU with a turning quarterback. That should feel like enough to where you should be a top 12 team probably.
I feel like the weird thing about LSU last year was they were fairly inconsistent, yes, but what really doomed that year for them was that 4-game skid they had in the back quarter of the season. Like, yeah, they lost to USC early on hurt, but you followed that up with a pretty decent win against South Carolina, a team that ended up being really, really good that year. You followed it up with a couple of other wins, but then you go to Texas A&M, get handled in Kyle Field, obviously the embarrassment against the Alabama game. Then you lose at Florida. That's 3 straight games, 3 straight L's that just completely doomed your season. And then, you went to Vanderbilt, played them at home at night, the quintessential we don't know why this is a night game, but LSU, here you go game. You win that game by 7. And I know Vanderbilt wasn't, the Vanderbilt of old last year, but you should be handling those games. So it just felt like that season ended with a really bad taste in LSU fans' mouths. So I think that, win game 1. I mean, we're going into year 4 or 5 of Brian Kelly. He hasn't won week 1 yet. So, I mean, that is the baseline for, hey, if you can do that, get that season start off well. You play against Clemson this year, so that'd be a very big win for you. And don't have these 3 or 4 game skids. You can lose games like you can, lose to teams that you should be losing to, but don't have this 3-game skid where it's like, damn, they look horrible.
And if you put it this way of, you got Garrett Nussmeier for this year, and then it's the Michael Van Buren experiment moving forward. Now, I think Michael Van Buren looked pretty good for Mississippi State last year, and then elects to leave them. He's going to be this the second quarterback behind Nussmeier this year, but a name like Michael Van Buren potentially being your starting quarterback next year, that doesn't feel like something that's putting you into a conversation of, hey, we didn't make the playoffs in 2025, but don't you worry, the former Mississippi State Bulldog is taking us to the promised land.
Yeah, it's far from Heisman winner Jaden Daniels, so that's that. But I think LSU could have a decent season. The last 2 teams we have are Kansas, or we have 3 actually.
Yeah, we still got a few more.
We got a couple more.
Don't shortchange me.
My bad. Let's talk about the world's favorite team, the Kansas Jayhawks. What's a successful season for Kansas, JWill?
As much as I'd like to say that this is the magical year where because I said last year they were potentially a playoff team, and
I believe so hard.
That did not go too well. So I'm not pushing the limits this year. I've learned my lesson, and I'm going to be quite realistic with Kansas. I'm going to say 8-4 is the floor for them this year.
Mm-hmm.
The schedule is very manageable in my opinion. I don't think that I think they play Kansas State. That's like one of the few notable teams that they play. Utah's in there as well, but Utah, I think especially after last year, I'm not really putting them in this upper tier of Big 12 teams. I think they're just kind of hanging around the middle like a lot of these teams are, it seems like, in that conference. So I think Kansas does belong kind of in that middle tier. But they get Jaylen Daniels back yet again this year.
I thought he was.
And yeah, you and I both thought he was off the roster, but he's coming back for another season. And the biggest thing there is Jaylen Daniels is going to have to be the life of this team, almost for both ends of the football, because he really is what you have right now.
There's no Devin Neal in the back.
There's no Devin Neal. You lost both of your corners last year who were really solid for you. But the thing last year for Jaylen Daniels was he was turning the football over a lot, especially in that game against Illinois. That was one where I was watching. I mean, just down the stretch in the second half of that football game, there were just Illinois corners sitting on every route and picking him off and putting him in tough situations. Could not get any consistent ball movement from the offense. And for a team like Kansas, again, especially in a conference like the Big 12, you got to master something. You either got to be masterful on the defensive side of the football, or you got to be really good offensively. And Jaylen Daniels is going to have to really elevate that offense for them to take leaps this year from what they were last year. So that's kind of why I went with an 8-4 year for them, which I think is pretty solid for their standards.
Kansas has one of the few opportunities, and not every team gets this. It's the at least we beat blank game. The game where, the season might not be going well, but if you win that game, you can hang your hat on it for the year and kind of salvage it. Kansas has that. They play Missouri in week 3. I don't know if people remember how much these two teams used to hate each other. Missouri went off to the SEC. The opportunity to, 1, beat an SEC team, and 2, beat an old rival that you used to hate, That's a major, major catalyst for them. So I think beating Missouri is definitely one of the catalysts for having a successful season. And similar to LSU, don't go on a skid. They started the year out 1-0, and we were like, let's go, baby, Kansas to the playoff. 5 losses in a row. And it wasn't to like good teams. It was to Illinois. I think there was a UNLV in there. Like just losses that you cannot have. A 5-game skid. And then they closed the year out playing 4 top 25 teams. Beat 3 of them.
Yeah.
So stuff like that you can't have this year for Kansas. And if they didn't have that last year, that's an 8-4, 7-5 team. Not bad. So as long as you get rid of the skids this year, beat Missouri, and get every single drop of talent and potential you can out of Jaylen Daniels, because he has been there for 5 years now. I think he's a 6-year college football player. The experience you have to use, the talent you have to use, he can make things happen. He is a little turnover prone like we saw, but if you can maximize his potential, beat Missouri, and not go on one of these skids, Kansas can be in for a really fun year.
You want to put the tinfoil hat on for a minute?
Right.
I'm going to. Kansas, known as a hoop school, like Kansas basketball, known to be one of the better teams in college, like a blue blood of college basketball.
That they are.
And this year, kind of teetered off a little bit, not even in the top 25. People have been a little disappointed in the Jayhawks on the basketball court. My tinfoil hat theory, they're pushing all the resources to football. They know where life is at now. They're saying, we got Jaylen Daniels back for another year. We beat 3 top 25 teams last year to close out the season. Bye-bye hoops. It's a football town now here in Kansas. We're no longer considering the basketball team the premier sport here. Changing to a football school now.
Are we going to do it again, dude?
I can't afford that again.
We need to stop
afford
talking
that
about
again.
Kansas before. Oh, how about a team that has
circle myself back into it? I can't be doing that.
How about a team that has national title aspirations? The Oregon Ducks. That's a team that I think is kind of interesting because the only undefeated team to enter the playoff last year and probably suffered the most embarrassing loss. So had by far the best regular season, but arguably the worst postseason as far as playoffs go. What's a successful season for them?
I think it's kind of simple for Oregon. I think that one thing you should go undefeated this year. Again,
you should.
Schedule. I mean, it's just gifted to you both years now in the Big Ten. Nice. Don't even have Ohio State on the schedule this year. Like, it should be a 12-0 year for Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks. And then the other thing is, not only do you need to make the college football playoff, but we need to see some progress in these playoff games. Like, we need to see you win a game. We need to see you make a push now. So I think it's a big year for Dan Lanning and them to kind of, they've kind of proven that they are a national contender. Obviously, I think they're one of the better teams in college football, but it's a matter of proving that you're ready for this stage, proving that you are ready to compete for a national title, and getting routed by a team that you beat in the regular season last year. Not exactly a great way to go out, but they still got some solid talent. Lost a ton of pieces, though, as well. So it's kind of about Dante Moore. Can we get yet another transfer quarterback to come in here and light the world on fire, and making sure that we get a bunch of other pieces fixed into the mix as well? But, they've been recruiting arguably better than anyone else, and they continue to rack up and stack up talent in both the transfer portal and on the recruiting trail. So they're certainly set up consistently to be successful in that conference.
I have a theory on Oregon. They're one of the few teams in college football, and there's only like 5 or 6 of them, where if you handle your business, you should be competing for a national title, at the very least making a deep playoff run. Oregon is one of these teams. I feel like Oregon peaked too early last year.
Yeah.
I feel like after that Ohio State win, it took them a couple of weeks early in the season. They had that scare against, I think it was Idaho State. Boise gave them a run for a while. Then they started really getting things rolling. That win at Ohio State, they skyrocketed. They beat the hell out of teams. They beat Michigan. I think they 38-0'd someone. And then they slowly on that downward trajectory. We talked about that in the Big Ten game. They should not have given up that many points to Penn State.
No.
Now, I know that Penn State was a very good team. They made the Final Four last year, but they were not an offensive juggernaut. Penn State should never run for that much and put up 37 on you. But we all kind of just looked at it as like, hey, Big Ten title match, that's nothing. I think they were on the downward trend by the time they got to the Rose Bowl, and it was very clearly indicative by the outcome of that game. Ohio State killed them. So I think a successful season for Oregon is, one, handle the things you're supposed to. It's a very manageable schedule. You should go 12-0 in it, like you said. Handle that, you'll be fine, but don't peak too early. That'll be a success for Oregon. If you can get to that mid-November, early December even, that's when you start hitting that upward trajectory. I think if they do that, they'll have a very successful season. It's pretty simple, but
yeah, and I think with the schedule that they have, they can kind of manufacture the time that they peak because you really don't have to worry about any of these major threats like playing Ohio State in the first 6 weeks of the season. So you're not having to ramp yourself up to make sure that you're ready for that game and then kind of hit this lull in the schedule and then have to ramp it back up again for the college football playoffs. I think you can kind of coast your way through this season, and then as it gets closer to the end of the regular season, you can ramp it all the way up and be ready for a college football playoff. But I mean, Dan Lanning has answered possibly any question you could ask out of a head coach. Of he's hired the right guys, he's hired multiple offensive coordinators that have been successful, he's recruiting the right guys out of the transfer portal that are being impact players, and he's getting quality high school recruits across the country. So I think he's doing everything that you would ask out of a head coach. It's just a matter now of figuring out those big moments and getting over those.
And on top of that, he won big games last year with his coaching. I remember it wasn't that long ago in 2024 when it was kind of like, Dan Lanning was going through all those fourth downs against Washington. He was like, what's this guy doing? He always coaches poorly in big games. That call against Ohio State in the regular season, with the 12 men on the field that ultimately led to Will Howard running out the clock, that is coaching masterclass. That is something that we had not seen up to that point. And then again, I just mentioned, shouldn't have won in the fashion that you did, but a Big Ten win over Penn State in the Big Ten championship, your first year in the conference, is a big win. So he also proved that he's capable of winning the big games. He's just got that one final piece to get now of winning a national title, which it's the biggest piece and the hardest one to get, but he's more than capable of doing it. Another team that's kind of looking for that final piece that I think is a little further than Oregon is Tennessee. And they're in an interesting situation now because I feel like the Josh Heupel experience isn't souring, isn't going bad, but I don't think people are going to be getting tattoos of his face anymore. Yeah. And I mean that in the way of there's not this undying love for him. There's people starting to look and raise eyebrows and go, what's going on here? Why has things not gotten better since 2022? Why have they felt like they've slowly declined?
Yeah, I'm just going to say, if there's any Tennessee fans questioning Josh Heupel whatsoever, you're an idiot. That head coach has elevated your program further than anyone has over the last 15 years, maybe even 20 years. I think he's done a phenomenal job. I think he's shown that he can win in a multitude of ways. He can morph his offense however he wants. He doesn't have to be this pick and stick throwing offense like he was with Hendon Hooker. He then takes Joe Milton and Nico this past year, makes it kind of a running-based offense with two stud running backs. So I think he's done, and he's completely shifted the defensive side of the football, and he's shown massive improvements there. But I think it's also a matter of not hindering expectations, but having the right expectations going into a season of something that we've kind of talked about a lot here. Is it doesn't feel like that 2025 is the win now window that we kind of expected it to be a year ago, because Tennessee feels like one of these programs that when the transfer portal comes in, they're just going to be throwing deals all over the place and getting anybody that they feel like can help their roster. And they didn't really make any moves. And it feels like, and now they've got potential of losing Ricky Gibson out of the defensive back room. Now, he's been at practice with them, but still a potential there where you lose him. And you can't afford to keep losing these valuable players like a guy like Ricky Gibson, who started games for you last year. But you get Nico back this year, and it's a matter of, is Mike Matthews going to turn into the star wide receiver, the 5-star prospect that he was coming out of Parkview High School? Is the defense going to remain the same? And is Boo Carter going to take this year 2 leap with them? He's been a big contributor for them. But you lose a guy like James Pierce. What's that going to look like for you? You lose a lot of guys up front on the offensive line, which is kind of a very up and down spot for you to begin with. So I think it really kind of does boil down to Tennessee this year of maybe getting back to that, being able to throw the football efficiently and successfully. I'm not saying that they got to start slinging it 45 times a game or anything like that, but I think that there was issues with drops last year. There was issues where it felt like they couldn't even complete a pass because it felt so congested, because they didn't have the wide receivers that could just get open now. So I think if you can get that going, you've proven that you can be super successful in the run game and beat teams in the run game offensively. So I think you got to get the passing game to coincide with that and have Nico take steps forward as well. And then also showcase why you were not active in the transfer portal. You didn't go and get anybody in the portal. Well, let's prove that the pieces on our roster were good enough and why we believed in these guys. I think those are the two big things. And if Josh Heupel does that this year, you have to have full trust, in my opinion, in what he's doing if you don't already.
I think success for Tennessee starts with protecting Nico. He's gotten a lot of unfair criticism because, frankly, he was running for his life in 2024. Go back and watch the Ohio State game. For God's sakes, his helmet got broken halfway through. So you protect him. You give him the opportunity to develop into the quarterback that Tennessee says he was. Tennessee fans believe he can be. What you paid him for, the classic, this is who we paid $8 million for. Yes, let him develop into that. Protect him. Their deep shots were not where they needed to be this year. They were not, Hendon Hooker-esque of 2022 because he was under duress. I feel like he was very uncomfortable at times. And like you said, the talent pool, the wide receivers, not necessarily there. And there were a lot of drops. So I think that I honestly don't have a lot of critiques for the defense. Maintain defensive output because you were one of the top 10 in the country last year. If you can become one of these teams that is, oh shit, we cannot let them throw deep on us because they'll take our heads off. You got to the middle point of the season last year. It was basically, all right, well, if we can stop Dylan Sampson, they're probably not going to hit too many deep shots on us. So we're not that worried about the offensive attack. We can just kind of lean on these guys, and eventually we'll find points on offense because that's just how modern football works. That's kind of what Tennessee was last year, and that's kind of how teams beat them towards the back end of the year. If you can get back to this, you don't have to be 2022 Tennessee offense. Like, that was a very scary offense. Just be efficient enough and scary enough for teams to respect you so that you have this wide array of options open. You don't have to just force feed a running back. You have someone who can take the top off or throw the ball or even run the ball himself. So that's going to be success for Tennessee's offense. I think the main catalyst is going to be make the playoff again. You set that expectation now. You should be making the playoff every year, but don't get embarrassed like it. You don't have to win your first playoff game. You don't have to win a playoff game. But what happened in Ohio State was pretty embarrassing, and I think it left a lot of Tennessee fans, like you said, questioning if Josh Heupel was the answer. I absolutely think he is, but the reality is you go out there and you get beat. I think it was 28 points?
Yeah, I wouldn't.
You lose by 4 scores in a playoff game. People are going to look at you funny no matter what. You could be Nick Saban, you could be Kirby Smart. People are going to say, what's going on here? So if you can go out there and have a strong showing, now obviously we saw that Ohio State was the team that they were, and playing in Columbus is not fun, but don't have an embarrassment in the playoff.
Yeah, and but again, I think that once you kind of learn too the kind of role that Ohio State was getting on to close the season, I mean, you might as well walked into a buzzsaw last year. You going to play Ohio State on the road. I mean, especially considering you're coming off of 2 weeks removed from them having the most embarrassing loss of the entire season for themselves. They go on and win the national title. So I think with hindsight, you can kind of accept that loss a little bit more now. Accepting the fact that you got embarrassed by them, not so much. But again, I think that they're in a great spot. I think that Josh Heupel has continued to put that team in winning situations. It kind of is like maybe getting this proverbial monkey off your back when it comes to Georgia. You got Georgia at home this season. You can get them early as well. And they got a new starting quarterback. It's going to be his first true road test in the SEC. So that's a time to where maybe if you're ever going to get Georgia, this would be the time to do it. You've already proven you can beat Alabama. So between those two teams, if you can get over that hurdle, both of them in one season, then they'll be in great shape this season.
I wrote a list. I think if you can beat 3 of these 4 teams, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, Oklahoma, those are your 4 kind of biggest SEC matchups. You don't have to beat them all. You don't have to go 4 for 4, but if you can combine a Florida and Oklahoma win with a win over Georgia or Alabama, that's a really successful season. You haven't beaten Georgia since 2016. Like, you haven't beaten Georgia in Knoxville since 2015. You're going on 10 years now. So the fact is, if you can knock off one of those teams, that's a really, really good something to hang your hat on. It's one of these, like I said, at least we beat blank games. So I think that Tennessee should absolutely look to win that. Did you see this Nick Saban story?
I did.
So
I have my own take after you read this.
So I'll lead into it. Nick Saban obviously has gone on to greener pastures of sitting in front of a microphone and camera just like I'm doing. But anyways, he is now a college football analyst on game day and went viral numerous times last year for, maybe sprinkling a little profanity, coach speak, if you will. Some shits, some bitches, a couple of those. Nothing too crazy, but people who regularly watched College Game Day were not fans of that, so much so that they filed complaints to the FCC. For those who don't know, the FCC basically regulates all broadcast in the United States, makes sure there's no profanity, enforces that if someone says something wrong or someone does something wrong past a certain time, you get fined. So people were calling for Nick Saban to get fined. And in this story, it kind of pulled out the quotes from this, basically reading what people were saying about Nick Saban. So let me find the first quote here after my website.
I have it pulled up if you want me to
Do
read
you?
it.
Would you mind reading it for me, Jay?
All right. Nick Saban said the word shit twice, bitch once, and something else I can't remember. The complaint obtained by AL.com via Freedom Information Act request to the FCC read in part, I tune in to gain knowledge and insight on college football, not to have profanity stuffed in my face by a former coach trying to be funny. It will continue until you fine them $1 million or more. Chinchy fines accomplish nothing. Now, when I read that, you, whoever you are, sound like a biatch, to be honest, I tune into College Game Day to learn, like, dude, it's supposed to be entertainment. And Nick Saban throwing in a cuss word every now and then, like, one, that's just who Nick Saban is. It kind of takes you back to a little bit of what Nick Saban was like as a head coach. But if we're complaining about shit and bitch on television to the point where it's like, I don't like it because I'm trying to, it's getting in the way of my knowledge of the game. Come to our network instead of watching College Game Day on Saturdays if you want to build your knowledge on football.
Well, don't come here if you don't want to hear shit and bitch, because we're not governed by the FCC. We can say whatever the hell we want. But no, it's very interesting that, one, you turn on College Game Day to get insight and information and learn about football. Now, they do offer some things. There are some moments where Saban and Pat McAfee and Kirk Herbstreit go to the board and lay out things. But for the most part, that's an entertainment show. We're watching people kick field goals for money and put on mascot heads and read signs. Like, I don't think that's necessarily where you need to go for entertainment. The other concept of it is so funny to me that this person woke up, assuming they're on the Eastern time zone, woke up around 9:30, got their morning cup of coffee, got ready for a big Saturday of college football, and by 10:30 they were fuming because someone said shit. So much so that they had to write to the FCC. I think there was another person who wrote there, actually. If you scroll down, there's another quote that's just as good.
Oh, I didn't even read this one. Let's see.
It might be up a little further. I can probably find it.
I think to find these schools $100,000 is like worrying about mouse manure when you're... Oh, that's what Nick Saban said, right?
Yes, that's what Nick Saban said.
It's like mouse manure when you're up to ears and elephant shit, Saban said from Game Day set in Atlanta.
I mean, that's a classic, like, grandpa joke. Like, ha, ha, ha. I can't believe he said that. That's so funny. Yeah, here we go. I got it. College Game Day announcers continue to use profanity during their primetime broadcast. First of all, primetime broadcast is not 9 a.m. That's soap opera broadcast, brother. The offer from Chantilly, Virginia wrote, Virginia. On January 10th. During the Ohio State versus Texas game, Desmond Howard and Pat McAfee used inappropriate language for a family event. Nick Saban has used inappropriate language during a broadcast as well. If these men want to use this language, please schedule games after 9 p.m., which is, by the way, known as prime time. So the article went on to describe how, despite the complaints, FCC hasn't stated that they fined ESPN or anyone for doing it. So good on them for not doing so. But it is very funny that people are still getting this up in arms about things like that when the amount of media that is accessible to one via anything nowadays. I feel like you can turn on your TV or open your phone, and I don't know about you, but I see some pretty wild things on my algorithm. So
plus, like, so they mentioned, like, I believe they, like, the one quote said like 2 or 3 times he said this word. So we're talking about a show that airs from 9 a.m. to noon 14, 15 times a season, maybe even more than that now because of college football playoff. So we're talking
45 hours worth.
45 hours out of a calendar year. And we're going to gripe over 3 cuss words on national television. Like, if that's as minuscule. Now, it's not like it's filler words every time where it's like, well, I mean, shit, Des. Like, these boys can't do... like, I mean, it's every once in a while when he sees it fits. And every time it does, it goes viral on Twitter and people get a good laugh out of it. So I think this is very much so the minority crowd bitching about something that isn't necessary.
It is fun, and it's also just people trying to, be powerful and get power first. If I can do something about this, I'm going to write the FCC. But regardless, funny story. I hope Nick Saban doesn't change. He's been a very pleasant addition to College Game Day. I also think Pat McAfee is, despite what a lot of people think, but I enjoy it. JWill, last year we had a team that kind of surprised everyone with how well they did in the regular season, so much so that they made the playoff. They had a very, very boisterous head coach. Obviously, you know who I'm talking about. It's the Indiana Hoosiers. But it makes me wonder, now that we have this 12-team format, and there are kind of this, we have seen the way schedules lay out, teams have easier avenues than others. What do you think a team could be, or who do you think a team that could replicate what Indiana did is in 2025?
Yeah, so I saw that ESPN released an article about this today of like talking about who could be the next Indiana this season. And they threw out names like South Carolina could be one, or I think I saw some Illinois action on there as well. And for one, I don't really agree that South Carolina could be in Indiana because Indiana was a team that just felt like they came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
South Carolina could have been, was more so that last season where nobody really expected them to be that great. They expected it to be a down year for Shane Beamer yet again, and maybe even him being on the hot seat by the end of the season. So I don't think South Carolina is one of these teams that's just kind of going out of nowhere, and they don't even have this easy schedule that automatically puts them in a position to get into a college football playoff. Their 2025 schedule is brutal. So I just kind of disagree with that one. So I wanted to bring my own, and it's a team we've already talked about today, but I do think they kind of fit this bill of the Nebraska Cornhuskers being an Indiana-like team this year, purely based off of the schedule. I'll just go ahead and read it off to you. They got Cincinnati week 1, Akron, Houston Christian, Michigan, Michigan State, Maryland, Minnesota, Northwestern, USC, UCLA, at Penn State, and then Iowa.
You should not. 9-3 should be the expectation, but you can turn into that schedule.
Yeah, so maybe not the Indiana where you're only losing one game out of the entire regular season, but I do think they are a team that could very much so like storm into the second half of the season where you look up, they're releasing the first ever edition of the college football playoff bracket, and it's like, whoa, Nebraska's sitting there at number 11, and you look at their schedule, and the remaining schedule is Northwestern, USC, UCLA, Penn State, Iowa. Maybe they only have one loss at that point, so it's okay. Well, you can afford another loss to Penn State on the road. Just take care of business against the other teams. I mean, certainly a lot of other factors have to play into this. Like, obviously, one reason why Indiana was so successful last year was because of Curtis Wark and these big wide receivers that they had, and the offense was clicking on all cylinders. So that certainly has to happen. But I think it could happen for Nebraska because, like I mentioned, they went and got Dan Key. You got Dylan Raiola going into year 2. You just got to take some more strides on defense this year, get improvements there, and you might find the Cornhuskers, as Brooks would say, in the college football playoff this year.
Brooks. It was nice when
had to throw it in there for him.
For those who are watching, Brooks isn't here tonight. He is he's on a football pilgrimage to learn.
Not taking care of us.
Not telling us where he is or any of that. Either way, I did some criteria for having to be, a quote-unquote Indiana this year. I think you have to, one, have an easy schedule. Indiana was where they were last year because they had played absolutely no one and really only had to lose to one team by close enough margin, and that was Ohio State. They did that, obviously. So that's one of them. You have to have an easy schedule. I don't think anyone's going to be out here beating 3 top 25 teams coming out of nowhere. Be a team that people don't really have respect for. South Carolina would be one of these teams that don't fall into this category. Even in Miami, where they might not be ranked, they might be on the outside looking in, but they're still a brand that people look at and say, I could somewhat see that being a playoff team. Nobody looked at Indiana last year and said, I could see that. That makes sense to me, honestly. So have to be a team that isn't really respected. Can't be a semi-big brand either. Miami's, the South Carolinas, even somewhat of Nebraska, I think. Now, granted, they haven't been the brand that they are in the last 15 years, but something that's super recognizable, I don't think they are. Indiana was not this. Indiana football is not a recognizable brand. And then the last thing, I think this is arguably the most important one, the team has to have at least one big personality. I think a lot of Indiana's success and a lot of the tension that Indiana got was due to the fact that Curt Cignetti was running his mouth throughout the entire year. The whole Google Me campaign and the I win and all of that, like that it grew kind of legs of its own and really made Indiana more popular, more watchable. Even if people hated them for it and wanted to see them lose, the fact is they got more eyes on them, more people are watching it. You need to get some sort of exposure. Now that can be any team, but I think that is a necessary requirement to being one of these teams. So after all the research that I did, I decided that the Louisville Cardinals this year are the team that could be the
QB Whisperer?
The QB Whispers. Oh. Exactly. Let me read the schedule for you, if I can. I don't know why my laptop's... here we go. They start the season with 2 juggernauts in Eastern Kentucky and James Madison. Now, I know what you're thinking. Kirby, didn't James Madison give UNC like 70 points last year? Yes, they did. However, I don't think that's going to happen. If you go back and watch that game, UNC was starting like their 3rd-string quarterback. There was a lot of fluky turnovers there. I think there were 2 punt returns for touchdowns. Really weird game. So I don't think that is the baseline expectation for James Madison. After they play those 2 games, things get a little more harder with the Juggernauts. They play Bowling Green and then Pittsburgh.
Roadblock.
Pittsburgh, a team that hasn't really been good since Kenny Pickett was there 2 or 3 years ago. Then things start getting real. They play Virginia, a team that once again has not been anything to write home about all season. Then they have what I think is their first losable game of the season. It's midway through October on the schedule, and they have their first game where you go, that might be a loss. It's Miami and Coral Gables, Florida. Now, we have no idea what Carson Beck is going to be this season. We have no idea what that team's going to look like. Things could shake out for you kind of like they did with Michigan for Indiana last year, to where a team at the start of your schedule ends up being not that hard at all. I think that could be what it is for Louisville. After that, they play Boston College, Virginia Tech, and Cal. You should win all 3 of those games, hopefully. Then this is the Ohio State moment of Louisville's season, I think. They play Clemson. Now, it's in Louisville, but it's still Clemson. It's still what we think will be one of the top teams in the ACC. They won it last year. Dabo Swinney's been recruiting his ass off this season. So I would say that if you're going to lose a game, it's probably going to be to Clemson. And, if you lose that by, 10 points, it doesn't matter. Last one, they close out the schedule with SMU and Kentucky. Now, that's going to be the stretch that really decides their season. If you can beat SMU, and again, we don't know what they're going to look like. They were a really good team last year. They lost a lot of talent. And Kentucky, who might not even have Mark Stoops as their coach at this time. Let's be fair, dude. They went 4-8 last year.
That extension might keep him held on. But,
that's true.
It could get very
if that's the case, Kentucky's probably not going to be that great of a team this year. So I think Louisville is one of these teams where we look up and go, holy shit, where do they come from? And then you look back, all of the signs were there. So Louisville is my team to be, quote unquote, the Indiana of 2025.
It's unfortunate for them that they do have Miami, Clemson, and SMU on the schedule. If a tough schedule exists in the ACC, those 3 teams being on your schedule alone is like, wow, that's a gauntlet they got to go through right there. So not ideal for them in that sense, but Miller Moss showed some promise. Like against LSU last year, it's like, oh my gosh, Lincoln Riley has done it again. Miller Moss lighting the world on fire. Then it cooled off by the end of the year. But if they can get Miller Moss, if the QB whisperer, Jeff Brom himself, can get him playing at a high level, I think that, Louisville to me, every single season just feels like one of those fun wild card teams to pick out of the ACC, because it feels like they're always right there, where they're maybe like the first team in the middle of the pack, and they're maybe super close to being an upper tier team in that conference, to where they are just a fun team to pick and be like, I could see it happening. They got a solid head coach. They got a veteran quarterback now as well. So they always seem to get the right pieces out of the portal, and they do enough with it. So I like Louisville just because they are a fun team to kind of pick as, hey, you better watch out for these guys.
They manhandled Clemson last year. We talked about that on Tuesday. So, they've shown that they can do things like this. I think, again, it's all how the cards fall. Indiana's season last year fell so perfectly in their lap, where Michigan ended up not being good. All that you had to do was not lose to Ohio State by a lot. They did that and still managed to be a playoff team. So Louisville could absolutely be one of these, 11-1, 10-2 teams that don't make the play or don't make their conference championship, but you look around, it's like, might as well let them in because they've done enough to prove so. So I think that's who the Indiana is. All right, this is the part of the show we can very quickly do this. If you don't like video game talk, maybe take a 5-minute rest, go to the bathroom, do whatever. Don't exit out of the video, though, because numbers go down. We don't appreciate that. But ESPN or EA Sports kind of had I don't know if it was a leak or a reveal or whatever. It looked like a poster, but we saw the deluxe edition cover for EA Sports 26. And JWill, I just want to get your quick reactions to it.
Cool cover. They got a lot of people on it. Kind of what they did last year. Let's just and maybe this is a smart tactic. I will say this if it is going to be another year where it is just a bunch of faces and a bunch of names on one cover, I think that kind of is a smart way to go about this with college football video games, because leading into last year is it going to be Carson Beck on the cover? Is it going to be Quinn Ewers on the cover? Is it going to be so-and-so? Shedeur. I feel like doing it this way, you just appease way more people. You don't get into this argument of like, well, they're not the face of college football. It's Arch Manning or whoever it is. So I think it's a good idea of like, just put a bunch of well-known faces on there, get a bunch of teams involved, and nobody's mad at you.
The weirdest thing for me about that was first of all, we know why Kirby Smart wasn't at Pro Day yesterday, because he was flowing out there to take that cover
Of all
picture.
guesses, you could have given me a million guesses.
That would not have been
of
it.
why Kirby Smart is missing Georgia's Pro Day, and him taking a picture for a video game would have never even gotten into the mix whatsoever.
But correct me if I'm wrong, that was taken in Pasadena in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
Why do you fly out all these coaches and players to take a picture in the stands? That, let's be fair, the stands in the Rose Bowl look like the stands in Sanford Stadium, look like the stands in Neyland Stadium. They're stands. It's not anything where you go, oh, wow, that's really pretty. That part didn't really make sense to me. But other than that, it's a video game cover. I'm getting old anyway, so I'm not as excited about this one. I think the newness is kind of worn off for it. Are you going to even buy it this year?
Yeah, I'm gonna buy it.
All right, I'll buy it too, but I'm not like, oh, I gotta play, get my hands on it. So.
You just wait till you get in that middle part of June and we ain't got nothing going on. You're gonna be wanting to play some college football.
There'll probably be a day where Brooks looks at us and like, well, shit, are we gonna have to do EA's cover? We have to do content on.
Let's talk
football?
Overall ratings.
I mean, we're definitely gonna write articles for it. All right. Before we go to the local hour, I want to do this.
You just had to.
I had.
You just had to go do that.
All right, stick around. We'll be right back for the local hour.
Welcome into Talk the Dog, the show where we find a bone to pick and a take to give. These are not hot takes. These is dog takes. Can I talk that dog? What's up? You like that? You really like that? Let's shut up and grab some tape.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the local hour. If you caught the national hour, then you already know the news, but perhaps you're just a local hour listener, so we'll keep you tuned in. We don't have Brooks today. He is off building upon his knowledge of the game of football elsewhere, so it's just the boys, me and Christian, kicking it today in the studio. But don't think that just because Brooks isn't here that you're not going to get any little nugs or any intel here, because yours truly went to practice availability today for the first time in my career, so I'll be bringing you practice notes. I got drive down millage notes. I've got Kirby hot mic moments, and I was at Pro Day yesterday with Brooks as well. So we'll be bringing you all kinds of content and stuff that you care about with your football team, and new information, if you will, in a time of the year where new information about football isn't really abundant.
You've hit like full-time, full-blown covering Georgia football.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'm missing out on now is, I guess, a midweek press conference from Kirby. That's the only thing I got to check off the list, but we might get to check off one of those here in the near future.
Like, think about it. In the last 30 days, you've gone to the NFL Combine, you've been in Pro Day, you've been at media availability, you got to interview Kirby, I think, once, so you're literally living up, man. Congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you. So we're not going to hesitate or anything like that, or tease you and make you wait to the end of the hour. We're going to go ahead and give you some of these practice notes from Georgia today. We got a nice full 10 minutes of practice today in typical fashion, but it wasn't yoga or anything like that. We actually got to see some people moving around, and we got to see some action. So first things first, freshman quarterback Ryan Montgomery was working with the wide receivers, so it was just him throwing their routes while they were doing their footwork drills. And then Gunnar Stockton, Hezekiah Millender, and Colton Ginn and Ryan Polisi were off on the other side of the field doing their own thing. I saw them doing some ball carrying drills and some other things like that, working on their footwork, on some of their dropbacks and whatnot. So all the quarterbacks were there. Ryan Montgomery did have a knee brace on, I should say. A knee brace on, as we expected, as he is recovering from that ACL injury. So good to see all the Qs out there getting their work in. Number two, other note, I think this is a big one too, because this is a room again where there was a lot of questions about depth and who's going to be playing there and whatnot. Darren Ikenagbon, Gabe Harris, Quintavious Johnson, Chase Linton, and here's the kicker, Chris Jones, the linebacker, were all working with Coach Uzo with the edge and defensive end. So we kind of had this question of how are they going to find depth? There's big questions there. Who's going to play? Chris Jones, who was a true freshman last year, getting some work in with the edge.
And like you said, it makes perfect sense that they're doing this. That's a position where you go from having really big names. Those guys are departing off to the NFL now. You need to fill that void with bodies. Not just saying bodies. That implies that they're not going to do anything there, but have some depth there, have some players that actually know how to play that position, know the techniques for it. So it makes sense that they're moving Chris Jones there. And I think he's honestly a really good fit for it.
Yeah, and I have to say, I mean, obviously Gabe Harris, a big kid. We've seen Quintavious Johnson a little bit, but of all the guys that kind of stood out to me in that group, Darren Icanagbone, I mean, just a freshman, just arrived on campus a couple months ago. He does not look like your typical freshman. He looks like he could walk out there and play for them tomorrow, which is a good sign to see because, again, there's not a whole lot of depth around that position. You're going to have to find some bodies that can play immediately. He looks like, just as a player profile, just how he is built, he got the thick lowers, as Brooks would say. Got the thick lowers going on.
You were looking, weren't you?
I had to. I had to take a peek.
No, Jay.
I had to take a peek. I was like, what would Brooks be doing right now? He'd be checking out the thick lowers, man. We got to check him out. So, Darren Icanagbone got the thick lowers on him, and I think he's going to be an impact player.
Now, obviously, you saw 10 minutes of probably one-on-one work-throughs, but do you think that he could probably be, quote-unquote, the freshman, the C.J. Allen, the K.J. Bolden, the Brock Bowers type thing, or is it too early to tell?
I mean, maybe, again, like, I haven't seen really anything of him. I mean, he could be, like, just still super raw for all I know. They were just doing sled work while I was there, and I got a quick glimpse of that because I was drinking from a fire hose, quite frankly, today because, again, you don't get a whole lot of time, and I'm just, like, looking all over the place, like, where can I take pictures? What I need to be taking notes of? But I did want to make sure that I took notes of who was working with Coach Uzo, so I did that, and so I thought that group was worth noting. So he very well could be. I think that is an interesting name to keep monitoring through the spring, and when the spring game arrives, seeing how he looks as a true freshman in those types of moments.
Before you do that, Jay, we gotta go to the board now.
We got to go to the board.
Does he have that silver Sharpie over here? We've got
I think it's over there on his desk.
$20 super sub from Lord Razor for the chairman. Good on you. Thank you very much. I'll write your name now.
So maybe it was worth it. Oh,
click 3 when you get a chance.
Look at this. Multi-talented right here. We got everything going on.
Is it Lord Razor, LORRAZOR?
That is a Lord and then RAZO capital R.
All right, I'm going to write it right here.
Look at this. Multi-talented producers right here. Bam. Let's freaking go.
You can tell which one's mine because you can actually read it.
Oh, there you go. Not only did you sit in the man's chair, but you got to scrutinize his handwriting while he's not even here to defend himself.
He scrutinizes his own handwriting. He deserves it.
Man, I mean, for job security purposes, I'll just let you keep going.
Yeah, all right,
dig your own hole. Keep the shovel in your hand, buddy.
All right, didn't mean to interrupt your practice notes.
Oh, no,
Continue.
that was totally worth that. We appreciate you guys for sending that our way and showing respect to us and tuning in and hanging with us. We hope you guys are having a great time. Me and Christian, of course, are enjoying it as well. Now, the moment a lot of people maybe have been waiting for, maybe nobody has been waiting for this one, but I did feel as if it was worth mentioning in the practice notes. Landon Rolden repping number 84 at practice. It looks like that's the number that he is going to don during his Georgia football career. I mean, can't even stay away from the allegations anymore. They're in full force.
If you get number 84 as a shifty white slot receiver, you are Ladd McConkey. I'm sorry. And I've always been one to be like, each player's their own unique style. You know, you can't compare one to the other. It's apples and oranges. That guy's Ladd McConkey. I'm sorry. And maybe he's the first Landon Rolden. Maybe he becomes so great that people start going, before Landon Rolden, there was Ladd McConkey. So we'll see. But right now, as of now, you are Ladd McConkey Jr., Landon. No offense to you. That's a great honor to have. He's killing it in the NFL right now at 1,000 yards his rookie season. But that's the way it is.
So I guess we've kind of added a new stereotype to Georgia football. Now, the other ones are like, if you're a big, bulky running back, automatically Nick Chubb.
Yeah,
automatically the next Nick Chubb.
If you run over one player, all you have to do, break one tackle, Chubb Jr.
I mean, what are some of these other ones, I guess, now? Now we got Ladd McConkey stereotypes, or if you're the wide receiver.
Really, really gamey quarterback, Stetson Bennett. Just got that winner mentality, Stetson in him.
I guess this kind of happens with linebackers, not so much because there's so many you can compare people to.
If you're a fast Mike linebacker and you're kind of like play the position really well. Now it also helped CJ Allen that he wore number 3. People were like, "Oh, that's Roquan," but that's definitely one as well. You know what's one that I'm very interested in because it never gets a comparison, and he's a fan favorite. Now I kind of understand because he's a freaking unicorn, but no one ever looks at a running back and goes, "That looks like Todd Gurley."
Maybe it's just something about the name and everybody kind of recognizing that he was probably the most talented running back that Georgia's ever had, where you do stay away with it. Like, people aren't probably going to ever do now I say that, and there's already this next tight end coming in that people are doing it to.
Yeah, well,
the next Brock Bowers.
I have heard, Chat Hunter Lacey says, people catching passes at the tight end, like, "Oh, that was Brock Bowers." I remember in the SEC championship when Lawson Lucky had that incredible catch, people are like, "That was Bowers-esque.
That was Brocky-like."
Brocky-like. But yeah, there are a bunch of those comparisons. So
I know. I said most talented. I know Herschel Walker is the go to the running back position, but
of our lifetimes, at least.
I mean, Todd Gurley was very special as well.
My dad was 7 when Herschel Walker was running around.
Speaking of special football players, this has also made the practice notes, and this didn't take long to put in there. Elias Williams, as big, maybe even bigger than what we had imagined. I mean, he just stands out amongst all of the tight ends. He was standing next to Ethan Barbour. You could just see the difference of, whoa, this guy. And now they have him listed as 6'6" on the roster. I'm calling BS because I'm 6'6" myself, and I know they got the Guardian caps on and they got a helmet. But if that man is 6'6", I might have shrunk a little bit, and I don't like hearing that.
Jay was walking over.
Yeah,
there's no way.
So
come over here. I need to measure you.
Big tight end. I mean, obviously something different that Georgia didn't have in the room prior to his arrival. Kind of akin to what Darnell Washington provided that room of when he walks out on the football field. You're like, what the heck? What position is that guy? He plays freaking tight end. So yeah, everything looks beautiful about Elias Williams. Did get a nice Kirby Smart quote in the mix here.
I have a couple of those as well. So.
Oh, maybe we'll save those to the end.
We'll save those.
Stay tuned for the Kirby Smart hot mic moments. So we'll keep moving on there then. Nate Frazier, Cash Jones, Chauncey Bowens, the notable names that are out there working with the running backs. They, much like the quarterbacks with Gunner in them, they were on the opposite side of the field that they were on, so it was kind of hard to gauge and get the numbers. But I saw Nate Frazier out there, I saw Cash Jones out there, and I saw Chauncey Bowens getting in some work as well. I also saw some Dwight Phillips in the photos that I took in the background, and I believe I saw Bo Walker, who's repping 24. So all the running backs that you would want to know about, they were out there getting their work in.
Did you see any Branson and Rod? I mean, that's kind of the two where it's like up in the air of their coming back from injuries. How close are they to being back? What were they doing? Did you see them working out, or did they have black jerseys? Were they? There
were no black jerseys from what I saw at all on the football field. So might have been one of those things where, hey, media's coming out, we're going to take you guys off. But I did not see either of those two out there.
That would be very Kirby Smart. Like, for those who don't know, typically the way things work in practice, offense will wear red. Defense will wear white, and if you're a non-contact player, i.e. quarterback, if you're injured, if you're someone like that, you will wear a black jersey so that people know, hey, don't hit this guy, wrap up, so-and-so like that. So just baseline information for those who might be new.
Yeah, I get in. Kirby Smart said those boys need to get in shape. That's one of the Mike moments. I'll go ahead and give you that when he said the running backs got to get into shape, and they certainly need to do that. And that kind of plays a role into Roderick Robinson and Branson Robinson as well. If those guys are going to have to get into game shape, but probably more so speaking of a guy like Chauncey, who we talked about previously this week, is it's a big spring for him because there are more reps available to him. We know what Cash Jones can do. We're hoping that Nate Frazier is going to fix the fumble problem, but Chauncey Bowen, certainly someone that's probably going to have to take an expansive role next season this year.
Going back to when you said get in shape, like, there's a reason for this. It's not just a cliche of, hey, you gotta be in football shape. Go back and talk about at the start of the 2024 season what that running back room looked like. There was a time where you had Andrew Paul, it was Cash Jones, Nate Frazier, Branson Robinson, Roger Robinson, I think, was still healthy at the time. Like, you had 5 guys where it was like very, very strong. Trevor Etienne was in there. That's 6. Like, you had 6 running backs where it was like, damn, they got a full room. Go to mid-October, late November, it's Nate Frazier, Trevor Etienne's battling a rib injury, Branson's out, Rod's out. We'll throw Cass Jones in there every now and then. Your workload is going to increase exponentially as a running back. So you look around right now, and you got 6 guys sharing reps, but you're going to get to mid-November or back end of the season. You're going to look around, and it's me and 2 other guys. I got to be in shape. And Kirby Smart has this old adage where if you're worried about getting shape in the middle of the season, it's too late by that point. So get in shape now, which absolutely makes sense why he's pushing that room more and more, because they've dealt with a lot of injuries the last few seasons.
Yeah, I mean, they have been a banged-up unit. It feels like they haven't had their number 1 option at running back available for week 1 in what feels like multiple years now. So would like to see that room maybe not be fully healthy by the time the season rolls around, but at least have your main core guys be ready to go, even if it is against a cupcake team like they're opening up against this year. So getting those guys ready and having them at least majority available in healthy by the start of the season would be a major plus for Georgia, especially considering that one thing fans would like to see this year is improvement in the run game and more consistency in the run game. Well, one way you're going to get more consistency in the run game is by all those guys remaining healthy and getting reps throughout the entire offseason. So again, just good to see that those 3 guys that we knew were going to be working out and practicing this year, they were there today at practice. Another guy that Kirby Smart already confirmed was back with the team, but Colby Young was out there practicing today. But not only that, in the drills that they were doing with the wide receivers, it's just a little footwork drill, run a little slant, catch a ball from Ryan Montgomery. There was 2 guys going at the same time. He was at first in line with Dylan Bell. So not that really means a whole lot, but the fact that Colby Young, kind of pin that as like a leader guy, the standard guy.
I was going to say, let's clarify. It's not a roster thing. It's not a depth chart thing. It's not Colby came back and he's starting day 1. This is a very much typically the leader of the group will go first, or typically someone who knows what they're doing or can set the example will go first. So the fact that Colby Young is there, 1, says dividends about the type of football player that he's trying to become, or 2, how his teammates view him, that they would appreciate that and allow that to happen, or even how the coaches would view it. There have been some instances that we know of when I saw this playing football myself, where if you do something and mess up, you kind of lose that privilege of being the first one to go. So the fact that Colby Young is doing that, no indication for the depth chart, but it is an indication that he is one of these leaders right now. Yeah,
and then, the lineup kind of made sense of Colby would go first along with Dylan Bell, and then it was Zachariah Branch to follow, and then Noah Thomas was right behind Colby Young, and then you got some London Humphreys in the mix, you got some Jacoby White on the other side as well, and then you just kind of worked your way down to the freshmen as well, like Taylor Taylor and CJ Wiley were both out there as well. Tyler Williams was a participant that I saw as well, so it just kind of worked down the ladder, but the fact that Colby Young was first in line and kind of that example guy, I thought was worth mentioning in this, just considering of like he hasn't been playing with the team for the past 3 months or 4 months or whatever it is at this point, but still holding that number 1 spot in kind of that example type role, especially for a team that is trying to work in a guy like Noah Thomas, who is going to need to play and have a big year for Georgia and hit one of these home runs on one of these transfers wide receivers that we've been talking about, because they haven't found that yet.
There's another guy on there. Did you see any Zachariah Branch? How did he look?
Yeah, I mentioned Zachariah Branch. He was wearing number 1. Tiny guy. Not that I expected him to be like this mountainous human being or anything like that.
Williams.
But when you go through watching Colby Young and you go through watching Noah Thomas and heck, even going and watching Dylan Bell, and then you get to Zachariah Branch, there is like this notable size drop off, but he kind of just fits that perfect mold of what you're looking for in a playmaker in the slot. So he moved well. Didn't really get to see a whole lot from the wide receivers, but from everything that I saw, they were all out there moving well. It didn't look like anybody was favoring anything.
Sweet. Is that all you got for practice notes? You got more?
Noah Thomas also brings some notable size this wide receiver, Mike. Especially, I can't express this enough, of late in the season, being down on the field for the SEC championship game, watching the wide receivers warm up from what they were at the end of that year to now watching them in practice. I mean, it's notable to go watch the wide receivers now in practice, like, whoa, Noah Thomas, whoa, Colby Young. Like, you have some notable size, something that Georgia has been looking for, and they absolutely need this year in the wide receiver room. So it's good to see those types of bodies. I mean, even guys like CJ Wiley, that provided some noticeable size. Kind of was eye-popping when you're just out there glancing at practice. And then my final note, Tate Ratledge and Chaz Chambliss were still hanging around. They were in the background, catching maybe the last few flicks of practice, or maybe just hanging around for the entirety of it. I don't know, but saw those 2 guys chilling around at practice.
I mean, that says a lot, simply because of the fact that Pro Day was 24 hours prior to, so the fact that they're still willing to go through the building, say what's up, say hi to the guys, watch former teammates and new guys, and talk to coaches, like, they were deemed leaders all throughout their career. actions speak louder than words, and they show it every single time. Chaz actually had a pretty good showing out in his pro day, something that you also covered as well. What was the experience like for that?
Yeah, first time at pro day, it was a cool experience. Kind of, the thing with pro day though is my biggest thing for the guys that are there testing, and Brooks mentioned this, and I kind of felt it too while I was there, is it's kind of nice just getting one last, not really goodbye, but getting to watch those guys one last time, wearing the Georgia G on their chest, being in Athens, doing some workouts. It was just kind of good to see those guys work out one final time before they go off to the NFL, and we maybe never even get to see them in person again, So it was cool to see all those guys, especially Chaz Chambliss and Dan Jackson and Ben Urasa, guys that did not get invited out to the NFL Combine, getting to watch them show out and show their skill set in front of all those scouts. But it was cool. It was a great experience. Definitely get to see some familiar faces from the NFL landscape. Not that I'm great at noticing names or recognizing faces and being like, oh, that's who that guy is. But for the few names and faces that I can recognize, it was cool to see that. And then obviously getting to see Gunnar Stockton throw in person, that was probably the biggest part of the day of, has there been any refinement? Has there been any changes? What is he looking like? Just kind of getting a little bit of a refresher of what Gunnar Stockton at quarterback looks like.
Yeah, well, we can talk about that in a few, but I kind of want to talk about the three guys, the two that were snubbed, and then the third who opted not to work out. Mykel Williams obviously is practically a lock for the first round at this point. Opted to not work out at the combine, he and Jaylen Walker. Jaylen Walker was going to work out at pro day, dealing with a hamstring or a quad.
Yeah, I think he said quad.
One of those two, so not working out. But Mykel Williams he ran the 40. He did a broad jump, I believe.
I don't know if he did a broad jump. The only thing I saw Mykel do was he ran.
Okay, so he ran in the 4.7s areas.
Yeah, that's what
I'm seeing a lot of reactions on social media that are saying, oh, falling out of the first round, or, oh, that's not a good time for him. I think people are mistaken as to what type of player Mykel Williams is, and this just shows, the ignorance of the common fan. Mykel Williams is not going to be a speed rush, get after the passer, Nolan Smith, Trayvon Walker type of guy who, relies on his speed. I don't think at any point in his career, his 3 years throughout Georgia, we watch Mykel Williams and say, man, he is fast. Mm-hmm. Mykel Williams is good at what he does because he sets the edge with strength and he's able to manhandle the edges. I think that's probably what he's best at. His pass rush bag isn't necessarily there, and that's why he's gotten the comps, and we've said on this network, to JWill Clowney. He's going to be a 9-10 year starter in the NFL. Probably not going to break a sack record. Probably not going to be one of these guys like Micah Parsons that lights it up. But I think if people stop looking at, and we know scouts and the real NFL cheese is not looking at him like this, as this guy that's going to be this ultimate pass rusher, they realize that he's a top 10 prospect, top 15 prospect easily. And I think that says in the 4.7.
I mean, too, and it's kind of crazy to look back on what is over Mykel's career, especially the hindsight that we got at the NFL Combine when he said, I played at 60% health this past season. It almost feels like for the last 2 years of Mykel, we never got to see fully healthy Mykel Williams, and he was still one of the most impactful players on that defense. So just kind of picturing a fully healthy Mykel Williams on an NFL team, I think that's a good spot to be in. Do we have another signature going up on the board?
We have yet another one, dude. I'm going back.
Man. Just showing all kinds of love to the boys.
Cody Strickland, isn't it?
I believe so. Let me double check that. I got to scroll up on. Where'd it go? Yes, that is Cody Strickland. Spelled exactly how you would think it would be.
Okay. C, right?
With a C. That is how you would spell Cody.
Any specific?
Super Chubb for the boys. Hey, yo.
Oh, chill, bro.
Keep it away. No, we appreciate it, man. That's awesome. We appreciate all the love and appreciate that you guys are continuing to stick with us tonight, even though the boss man isn't in house. Hope you guys are loving the content, loving what we are bringing to the show tonight with all these notes from Pro Day and also practice notes that we just finished up as well. But yeah, we can continue with some Pro Day notes. Anything else that I know you were kind of talking about the days that Dan Jackson had. He also had a phenomenal day. Mm-hmm. If Dan Jackson had tested that way at the NFL Combine, if he had gotten an invite, I think there would have been a ton of buzz around Dan Jackson's name.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the unfortunate thing, and that's why everyone was so upset when he was snubbed from it. It was like, this is a guy that's going to test so well. This is a guy that's going to turn heads. People are going to go, who's this white guy? What does he do? And then they're going to look up Dan Jackson and see the year he had playing, and it's going to be like, damn, we want this guy. He was robbed of that. Now, fortunately enough, scouts know who Dan Jackson is. Coaches know who Dan Jackson is. Dan Jackson is going to get drafted, but the difference of him climbing up into the 3rd round or being, a 5th or 6th round player was that combine. I think he would have absolutely done really well doing that, but he did really good at the pro day. I think he jumped. He ran a 40. Did he do a broad jump and vertical or just?
Yeah, he did all the things from what I saw.
So, I mean, good for Dan Jackson, and honestly, I hope he gets like a 3rd round pick. That might be a stretch just because, I don't know if there's ever been anyone who's not gotten an NFL combine invite and gotten to the 3rd round, but yeah, he deserves it. He's one of the few players that I watched from the start of my, collegiate watching career to the end and thought at first, who is this guy? He's a liability, to now he was the most reliable safety in the back end, and that's with Malachi Starks.
Yeah, and Brooks kind of going back to what I was saying about the pro day of kind of getting to say one last goodbye to these guys, if you will. Dan Jackson certainly being one of these for me because Dan Jackson and I are the same age. We graduated high school at the same time, got into college at the same time. So it's just kind of been like, a little bit of a full circle moment now, getting to watch him progress throughout his career at the University of Georgia and getting to end on a strong note. I mean, the strongest note possible for him, best situation possible for him as well. His vertical would have ranked 7th among safeties at the NFL Combine. So again, like if he had gotten that invite, who knows what the stock around Dan Jackson would have been. But I think that a lot of people walked away from the pro day very impressed with him.
Yeah. Last one that we're talking about is Chaz Chambliss, who again was not invited. Chaz tested very well as well. He did most things. I think he ran a 40. I don't know what time he did, but did a 10-foot broad jump, 32-inch vert, which I don't know where that would have ranked, but that's a really solid vert. And then I think the most impressive thing was, this was what kind of went semi-viral for him, 30 bench press reps at 225, and he was repping those out. I think my favorite part about watching that video was seeing all the current and former Georgia players cheering him on. You kind of got that glimpse of what it is like in the weight room with those guys, so that was very cool to see.
Yeah, so from my perspective, how it was working for us is they went over and did bench press, but we were standing on the field behind ropes with a bunch of people crowded around the bench press. So all you hear is Chambliss bench press, and you can't see anything because all of his teammates are crowded around him, but you can hear them start counting off. It's like 1, 2, 3. It's like, oh my gosh, he's crushing through this. And then I look over to my left and I see Dylan Bell. He's standing off to the side, peeping over, standing on, I believe what it was, a bleacher, and a bunch of other current Bulldogs cheering him on. And then obviously his teammates that are now going to the NFL with him, just getting rowdy as all get out, hyped that Chaz is getting to do this because Chaz is certainly one of the strongest people on that football team, and he got a great opportunity to showcase that. And yeah, just an unreal performance from him.
It's a lot of fun to have the curtain peeled back a little bit, and that's probably one of the great things about this job. When you see the inner workings of a football team, yeah, everyone can watch them on Saturdays play, and if you're lucky, you might get some hot mics and off the field things, but when you actually get to watch them be human beings and mesh together as teammates, it's really cool. And I obviously didn't get to see it in person, but just watching that through a clip on social media or something else, it's a lot of fun, so I appreciate videos like that. Now, you've mentioned saying goodbye to a lot of these guys of how, they're going to get drafted off in the NFL, teams like Minnesota, New England, places that we don't usually cover. Is there a chance you think this year that we don't necessarily have to say goodbye to a Georgia Bulldog?
I'd like to. I don't even know where you're going with this.
Well, there's a professional team in the state of Georgia that has notoriously neglected to draft Georgia Bulldog players.
I hate that I missed that note because you teed me up perfectly and it just went whoosh, right over my head. But yes, now I know what you're talking about. So I don't want you guys to hold me to this. I probably already know what the comments section is going to look like, and I'm sure before I even finish with this take, you guys are already going to be firing off in the chat with the responses to this. But I do think if there were ever a year that the Atlanta Falcons drafted a Georgia Bulldog in the first round, I think it is going to be this year for multiple reasons. I know there was a clip that went viral of Malachi Starks working out, doing his field drills, looking amazing like he always does. And Jeff Ulbrich, the defensive coordinator for the Falcons, went, that might be the safest pick of the entire draft. And I have heard some rumblings that of all the Georgia players that they like, Malachi Starks is kind of that number one option for them. They sit at the 15th overall pick, which is kind of that range that Malachi has been going in. Jaylen Walker, when he was asked about his relationship with Ulbrich and the Atlanta Falcons staff, he immediately started grinning ear to ear and talked about how much he is the bond that he's built with them, the relationship that he has with Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris. He certainly seems smitten over the Atlanta Falcons, and there's also been some rumblings of Mykel Williams potentially falling to the Falcons. Now, that's just him and Walker both are kind of like, are they going to fall to 15? If they do, maybe Atlanta's going to jump on that. But I think Mykel maybe doesn't necessarily fit the need of what Atlanta needs this year, where it's either going to be they take a safety probably or they take an edge rusher, and Mykel Williams is uber talented, but as far as like a pass rusher goes, just like a pure pass rusher off the edge, I don't know if Mykel Williams fits that, but if he's sitting there at 15, it might just be one of those things where best player available, we're taking Mykel Williams, which I've done that in years prior on the offensive side of the football, but it certainly seems like they're honing in on the defense. They sent more representatives this year to Georgia's Pro Day than they ever have. They were in full force in Athens yesterday. So I do think if there were ever a year, this would be the one to circle.
And I'll even add on to that. If you go to the Atlanta Falcons Twitter page, right, or excuse me, X, didn't mean to dead name
It's
it.
Twitter. Don't give me that bull crap.
Right, anyways, if you go to their social media page, they posted a picture of Leonard Floyd with the caption, "Ain't nothing finer in the land." Obviously, they signed Leonard Floyd a few days ago, former Georgia Bulldog, who they begrudgingly also did not draft during their time and, got criticism for, now you sign him when he's heading into his 10th or 11th year as a professional. So it seems like the Falcons clearly hear the public's murmurings and saying, hey, draft a Georgia player. This is the year to do it. We need Georgia players. Look at the Philadelphia Eagles, all those things. Speaking of the Philadelphia Eagles, they are dipping their hand into the Georgia Bulldogs portal once again.
Yes, they did.
They have now gone after coaches. It's not just drafting players. Now they're going after members of the Georgia Bulldogs coaching staff. Gummy Van Gorder, who I didn't know his name was Montgomery. I thought it was just
Gummy.
I'd always known that, but he was the quarterback's coach for the University of Georgia, is now signing on with the Philadelphia Eagles as an offensive analyst, I believe.
Yeah, and this was kind of funny because yesterday at Georgia's Pro Day, he was throwing balls to the DBs during their workout, and then the very next day, he's landing a job with the Philadelphia Eagles. But certainly a significant move worth noting because this is a guy that has been with Georgia since 2019, so a long time spent with Kirby Smart, a long time spent in Athens, and a very familiar name and face, now making the jump to the league. Now, his dad was a football lifer. He just recently retired after coaching high school football in the state of Alabama in like 2022, I want to say. But his dad had a very similar career arc of getting his footing in, then making the jump to the NFL, and then it kind of died back off and went back to the high school ranks after he in the state of Florida and also Alabama. But again, very much so like his dad of a football lifer, and it looks like he's headed on that same trajectory.
Not just is it important that Gummy Van Gorder is leaving, you need to refill this position ASAP because, one, you have a quarterback that's going to be making his first full season of starting. You have a guy right behind him that needs to develop as much as possible. You have a guy in Jared Curtis who you're desperately trying to recruit and need to somewhat get a familiar face in that door quickly. So this is kind of, you can look at it and be like, position player, position coach, offensive analyst, not a big deal. It's not an offensive coordinator. It's not a head coach. This could have major repercussions if you don't deal with it quickly. Now, obviously, Kirby Smart is the master of having 10 steps ahead of anything. So I would not be surprised if they named a certain player to be, or a certain coach to fill this void immediately. But it is something to look out for because it's not just a kind of, you can scoff at it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, losing a coach this late until, I'd say this late in the offseason, still got quite a few months left. But, typically the signing period for coaches or the moving portion of the offseason is like right there in January and February. So this happening in almost April, certainly significant. So it'll be interesting to see which name they hire. I would imagine it happens, like you said, pretty quickly because it is a position they probably need to fill sooner rather than later.
Now, this is the last thing we'll talk about Pro Day. JWill, aside from Mykel Williams being there, aside from Chaz Chambliss benching 30 reps, aside from Dan Jackson actually getting a shot, there was something that a lot of Georgia fans would probably have interest in watching, and that's Gunnar Stockton swinging the football. I think people forget that the sample size of Gunnar Stockton is last year's Pro Day, 1.5 against Texas, and a Notre Dame game. Like, other than that, you haven't really seen Gunnar Stockton throw the football a bunch, and you have footage of it, don't we?
Oh, yeah. Brooks took clipped every single throw that he had at Georgia's Pro Day yesterday. Obviously, there's a lot of questions of, is it going to be Ryan Puglisi? Is it going to be Gunnar Stockton? And, sometimes, and it did end up being Gunnar, which, again, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing because, like you just mentioned, we haven't seen much of Gunnar despite the fact that he has been a starter. But we also haven't seen anything of Ryan Puglisi. But, I mean, how they pick these, you never really know how it could be. Like, it could be as simple as, this guy has, I don't know, Algebra 101 at this time during the Pro Day, so he can't throw. So
those players don't like skipping class.
It was Gunnar Stockton who ended up throwing to the wide receivers.
Now, we don't have the lab and Epic Pen isn't pulled up, but we do kind of want to sit back and watch
some like little B-roll.
Watch Gunnar sling the pill while we kind of talk about it.
Oh.
Ooh, sound is on too, sound effects. Now, obviously, in some of these, it's just going to be, hey, I'm giving the receiver a catchable football to make them look good. I'm not here for me. But I do think there are some things to take away from that. One thing that, and this has been the criticism I've had for a long time of Gunnar Stockton, that windup scares me. And it feels like his delivery might have gotten a little bit quicker, but he has a very elongated delivery, and we've seen it cause issues already. I think in 1.5 games, he's had 3 fumbles. Now, this could be also due to the fact that your backside tackle was pissing down his leg in certain moments of those games. But the fact is, when you have an elongated release, the ball is in a more vulnerable position for longer, and it's more likely that if you get hit, you're going to fumble it. So I think that's one thing that worries me about Gunnar Stockton. But if you watch these are all accurate footballs. They're on time. Arm strength is not going to be an issue with him. I don't think anything. If there's one concern about Gunnar Stockton, it's not can he get a 50-yard ball down the field. So I'm not worried about the arm strength aspect of it.
And I think the evaluation of Gunnar has remained very consistent, especially after his Pro Day performance, of if he can stand on it like he is these right here, and he can just put all of his horsepower into it, he can put it anywhere he wants. He's going to be super accurate, and it's going to come out really well out of his hand. So these balls that you're watching him throw right now, you can see they're put in the perfect spot. They got some good velocity on it as one gets dropped right there. But anyways, so these types of throws, he has remained consistent at, but you'll see kind of later on in the clips, one part where he does just look a little bit uncomfortable is these throws where he has to layer the football a little bit and he has to put a little bit of touch under it. You can kind of see he just doesn't look fully confident and comfortable throwing those just yet. But I mean, all around from his Pro Day performance, it was very consistent. The ball placement was immaculate, and you'll get to see some deep balls here at the end. So I thought all around from a Pro Day performance from Gunnar, and especially knowing that this is likely going to be the guy in 2025 moving into QB1 spot, I feel like you can leave this Pro Day performance with a lot of confidence. Now, what you will see on these deep balls is one to Arian Smith where he just launches it by Arian, and the reasoning for that is you won't hear it in the clip, but the NFL coach that is running these drills told Arian, I want to see you run. Let's see if you can make Gunnar underthrow you. And then he changes his mind, says, better yet, let's see if he can overthrow you. And so Gunnar, of course, just said, all right, heck, let's overthrow. Let's moonshot this one. And so you'll see it land like 5 yards in front of Arian. But outside of that, it was a tremendous ball placement. And again, just typical Gunnar Stockton.
I also want to say at this point right now, it is so nice to have a quarterback back for Georgia that has a relatable forehead size. I was sick and tired. Now, say what you want about Carson Beck. His hairline was fine. Stetson Bennett, the Stet Quavius fade, very nice. It's nice to see, a fellow member of the balding community in Gunnar Stockton. So shout out to him. A very relatable, just the everyday man. I think this is I think you're going to start seeing the deep balls here.
They're coming up. Really? Balding? That's what you relate to with the Gunnar Stockton? I thought you were going to say something about Ben Urosic. I kind of think that's your doppelganger if there ever was one.
I'm not going to be mad at Ben Urosic comp.
I mean, look, he's got the stash going. He's got the buzz cut rolling as well.
Dude, I just have to accept the fact that within the next 5 years, I'm going to be skinhead. So seeing a high-quality football player like Gunnar Stockton dealing with the same things lets me know, he's a human being too. It makes me feel relatable.
Man, you're worrying about baldness. Brooks is always worrying about baldness.
Dude,
are we going to be like coneheads on the network?
60% of men by the age of 30.
Maybe eventually all three of us just go bald?
One of us has to be like the designated beanie guy.
The bald beanie guy?
The beanie guy. I can do that. I can rock the beanie.
Yeah, I mean, as you just watching all these clips, you can see it. I thought it was a really solid day from Gunnar.
Another thing I will say, we saw he was at Pro Day last year. He threw for the quarterbacks last year, obviously, because Carson Beck was deciding, whether to come back or not. I think this is what he tries to overthrow.
Yes, right here. I mean, just launches it.
Loses focus. I mean, that was a 50-yard pass. Either way, I will say this. Last year we saw Gunnar Stockton's Pro Day, and it was kind of that wasn't great. There was a couple moments where, balls looked like they got away from him. Now, getting used to an NFL ball in comparison to college football, very different. But he looked way, way more consistent here with his passes. And I think that was something that people who might not have necessarily been scouting Gunnar Stockton, but were scouting Gunnar Stockton, were looking for. So good for him for doing that.
And again, like the eval has remained very consistent with Gunnar, and I think that is honestly a good thing. The fact that you are getting consistency out of this guy, and obviously you're going to see other minor improvements in his game as he gets more reps under his belt and as he plays more Saturdays throughout the season. But the fact that he is consistent with his ball placement and you know exactly what kind of offense goes into his strengths, I think that's a great thing, especially with a guy like Mike Bobo, who has an extensive relationship with Gunnar Stockton dating back to him outside of college. I think that this is setting up really nicely for Georgia to see some really good improvements offensively. I guess it's really just a matter of, hey, can you catch the ball this year?
All right, now let's do something that is probably going to be a more uncomfortable conversation for the fan base. I don't understand what the infatuation is for as soon, the very second we have an inkling of who the next starter might be, who the next quarterback is, the fan base immediately goes, yeah, he's fine, but I think this guy's better. They did it to Carson Beck when Stetson Bennett was the starter. They did it to Brock Vandagriff when Carson Beck was the starter. They did it for Gunnar Stockton last year when Carson was the starter. Now they're doing it for Ryan Puglisi, which, by the way, we have not seen a single snap of Ryan Puglisi play
anything
football.
at all.
It's not like we've seen spring game practices. We've seen clips on YouTube of him being with a trainer and things like that and social media. And hell, he's got a great arm. But I do not understand this fan base in particular. And maybe it's every college football fan base, but I feel like I'm more in tune with this one than anybody else. I don't understand how immediately, just like that, every fan goes, I want this guy. You haven't seen Ryan Puglisi play. You haven't seen him take a snap of Georgia football in practice, in a spring game, in a real game, in garbage time. Now, to be fair, you haven't seen a lot of Gunnar Stockton either, but you were doing this for Gunnar Stockton last year before we even saw Carson Beck, or before Carson Beck was even halfway through the season. So I'm trying to understand that as a fan myself. Don't tell anybody. This is the local hour. But I don't get why the infatuation of Georgia fans is to immediately go, oh, the grass is green. It's got to be greener with the next guy. Is it because you want to be right? You want to be the one that, God forbid, if we get a Jake Fromm situation where Jacob Eason gets hurt and he comes in, or a Stetson Bennett, and you can be the one to say, see, I told you he was better. Is that what it is? I don't know. But I feel like as of right now, every inclination has been the staff believes that Gunnar Stockton's the guy. The team is rallying around Gunnar Stockton. Most of the fan base is rallying around Gunnar Stockton, but there's still a lot of people that are like, yeah, show me Ryan Puglisi. And maybe it's our fault because we've talked about, how much of a dog Ryan Puglisi is and how talented he is and how much, he's going to go in and compete for the spot, which he is, and all those things are true. But I don't get it. Do you understand, JWill?
Maybe it's this. Maybe as I was thinking about this while you were going on about asking why, maybe it is because when fans hear this word of, here's Gunnar's limitation, he can't layer the football. Maybe it's the word limitation that you guys hear, that are these people that are clamoring for a backup quarterback. Maybe when you hear the word limitation, that makes you immediately want to shift to, he maybe isn't going to be the guy, but this Ryan Puglisi guy sounds like he can do a little bit of everything. Maybe that's what makes people shift to the backup quarterback, because we don't know what Ryan Puglisi's limitation is as a college quarterback yet, because we haven't seen it. So maybe that's why you hear the word. But there's been limitations with every single Georgia quarterback. Even Carson Beck's limitation feels like we can't hit the deep ball consistently. That was something that Georgia continued to struggle with over his career, and then it became turnovers this past season. All people talked about with Stetson Bennett was the limitations of him with his frame and anything else. Maybe his arm strength, even though I thought he had a really good arm.
Ball gets batted down at the line.
Yeah, too short. Ball gets batted down. But I think maybe when you hear the word limitation with Gunnar Stockton, who wasn't this 5-star prospect coming out of high school, who doesn't look the part of maybe an NFL quarterback, limitation sounds like such a bad word to where we want to immediately move on. So I think maybe that would be my guess. And because Ryan Puglisi does feel like this maybe NFL prospect, this NFL prototype build that people like to see at the quarterback position. But by all accounts, again, like I said, I think there's a lot of positives, a lot more positives that outweigh the negatives when it comes to Gunner's game.
If you're a Georgia fan watching this live or however you watch it, if you're watching on YouTube after we've since gone off air, please comment in the chat why you think this is, because I would personally love to understand. And if you're a fan of any fan base that feels this way or that notices this, comment why, because I don't understand how someone can never see one player play and say he's better. I just don't get that. But we can move on to another topic that I don't really want to talk about this, but it's kind of the pressing news of the week so far, the biggest news thus far. It involves a former Georgia quarterback.
You said you formulated even a little bit of a take on this, huh?
Well, I feel like if we're going to bring it up, I have to have something to say about it. But if you haven't logged on to social media in the last 48 hours, or you just, haven't been paying attention, or you're checked out, you would not notice that quarterback Carson Beck and his girlfriend Hannah Kavanagh have allegedly broke up. Now, the reasons that they broke up, apparently Carson Beck was Snapchatting other girls, drama. I'm not here to give a take on that necessarily. I know there were a lot of people that were very mad at Carson Beck throughout the season for even dating this girl. All I want to say is that we're at a point in our career, if I'm Carson Beck, where we have to start helping ourselves out. We have to do things. We're going into year 6 of collegiate football. We have to start doing things. By the way, when you enter year 6, question marks already raised about you. They had this about Bo Nix. They had this about other guys of, hey, if you were, this great, why are you still here? Obviously, Carson Beck had the unfortunate injury at the end of 2024 that would have probably otherwise he would have gone to the NFL draft for. But the last 2 to 3 months of Carson Beck's, career have been a PR nightmare. You declare for the draft 3 days before a playoff game, then you immediately after they lose say you're going to enter the transfer portal. Kind of a what the heck moment there. The TikToks with the girlfriend thing, and then obviously now this story coming out. It's just a bad look, and you have to at some point say, what do you want out of football? Because you have to start acting like it. I hate that it's come to this for him, because I genuinely liked him during his time at Georgia.
Yeah.
But you're at a point now where it's like, dude, do yourself a favor. You're driving 6-figure cars and doing TikToks, and I mean, thank God you don't play for Pat Narduzzi. But the reality is just start helping yourself out more, man. That's all I have to say on that. I don't want to slam dunk, and you can go to other social media accounts and other places to find out what, bad jokes for it.
Yeah, I mean, it is just kind of unfortunate that when he is in the news, it never feels like it's anything great in particular for him. It's kind of unfortunate, but I get that's like the stigma that we've built around Carson Beck when it comes to breaking news and trendiness of him, is it never can be anything good. And I hate that it's kind of, his career is kind of turned into that. So hopefully he has a great end to his college career and he turns into this high round NFL draft prospect that many thought he would be going into last offseason. I kind of jokingly said during the pre-show that what if he were to transfer out of Miami and go somewhere else?
Can he even do that?
I have no idea. I don't know if he can do that. I don't know why he wouldn't be able to, but I do think it would be kind of, I don't know if funny is the right word, but it would just be like, oh, geez, like going on to another college and get a complete fresh start again, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I wish him well, but you're getting to a point now where there's obviously an old adage of some people love football, other people love what football can do for you. You're really dangerously teetering on, you look like you only love what football can do for you. That's not going to bode well for your career. And obviously, who am I to say this as someone who never played at the collegiate level? I'm the same age as him. Like it's kind of funny for me to sit here and like give advice to Carson Beck, but as an outsider who's watched this whole entire thing unfold from a fairly objective standpoint, I feel like at some point you have to do yourself a favor career-wise.
Would you like to end the show with some fun?
I would love to end the show with some fun, man.
After that, let's end with maybe some laughter and some good times. I mentioned it before. Usually when Brooks goes to practice, he brings us some Kirby hot mic moments, and he also brings us some great notes from his drive down Millage. Today, I get to do that. I have notes from Millage, and I have some Kirby hot mic moments that I think everybody will get a nice, good kick out of. So we'll start with the notes off of Millage, since that was my drive in, and that was also my drive out. Beautiful day in Athens, around 75 degrees, sun was out. So, I mean, it's just a perfect day to take a drive down Millage. And got to have the windows rolled down. You mentioned it during pre-show. Like, you got to have the windows rolled down because there's tunes everywhere. Every fraternity's blasting
every new
music.
house is playing tunes. It's amazing.
Yeah. So,
if you've never driven down Millage, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
you're good.
hijack
Keep
your
going.
segment. If you have ever taken the time, in college or not, to drive down Millage Avenue at some point in Athens in the months between March to late May, early May, because that's when the most students go home, you have to do it. It is the most college experience you will get being outside of college. It's good for your soul, honestly.
yeah, so driving down, all the fraternities just have all kinds of stuff going on in the front yards. Of course, the man boobies are out. Nobody has a shirt on, of course, because it's sunny in Athens, so why would you? So the first thing that I got to see, a good old honk and we drink sign. And I mean, this wasn't like a little front yard sign.
What time was this?
This would have been after practice.
So we're talking like 5 on a Thursday.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, like,
Okay, we probably got a date night later than that. That's
So it kind of makes sense. But this was a full-on, I don't know, like 10 by 20 plywood board just painted on that said honk and we drink.
Did you honk?
I did, of course. You got to honk. So, of course, I did. They went nuts, gave a cheers, put their beer bottle in there, all that good stuff. So that was a classic one. Then this is my favorite, well, maybe my favorite Millage sighting ever. I saw an outdoor poker game.
Outdoor poker
An
game?
outdoor
You don't
poker
usually see
game.
those.
I see all these guys sitting at a table, and I thought at first, like, what are these guys doing? School outside? A bunch of nerds? It's Thursday. It's beautiful. We're doing schoolwork? No. There's a metal briefcase in the middle, and they were all picking out poker chips, and they had the cards laid out, and they were about to play a poker game outside. I don't know if it gets any more dudes doing dude things than that right there.
I'm still taking college classes, and I very much miss that. Makes me miss being a college student. I think my favorite driving down Millage Avenue experience is when you drive by and people have their whole ass living rooms on elevated
Yes.
platforms.
Got the whole couch.
Like you can drive by and like someone's got a full recliner on a die table sitting like 2 die tables stacked on top of each other with a recliner on top of it, and a guy's just sitting 20 feet in the air drinking a beer outside in a recliner. The most college thing you will ever see. It's beautiful.
Yeah, so those are my notes from the drive down Millage today.
Any beer die games or pong?
Oh, yeah, of course. There was beer pong, beer die, people throwing the football, all the classic things that you could imagine
hell getting old,
fraternity
JWill.
boys doing. All right. Now let's get into the good stuff. Some Kirby hot mic moments. First off, got there, practice availability was at 4:15. Me being me, I got down to Athens about 3:30 because I'm not going to be the sucker that shows up late and misses anything. So park the car at 3:30. I'm about a block down from the practice field, and I already hear the mic echoing in the distance, and I just get a smile on my face. I texted you guys, I was like, man, we are officially back. I hear Kirby chewing ass already, so that was just a great moment. Music to my ears to hear that once again. Like I mentioned before, I told the running backs, hey, you got to get in shape. Got to get in shape, running backs. He said it repeatedly during practice period. As I was walking to the practice field, at this point, I'm like walking perpendicular with the practice field along the fence, or parallel, I should say. And he specifically told Xavier I almost said McLeod.
Oh, he did it. Brooks is still here, boys. Don't worry.
He's still
the spirit
here.
of Brooks lives on. He said McLeod.
Xavier McLeod. No bus this year, Xavier. No bus. Kirby Smart Diddy counter, maybe?
Pause.
Might have to get one.
That's a pause, Kirby.
That's a pause, Kirby. But yeah, told Xavier McLeod can't be having bust this season because he is going to have to be a familiar face and a staple on that defensive front, knowing the guys that they lost. Jonte Gilbert, a true freshman, already getting some early coaching in from Kirby, said, hey, man, we got to quit grabbing. We got to quit pulling. Specifically said, he's not throwing the freaking football, so why are you pulling and grabbing? Coaching up the freshmen.
Did he actually say freaking?
No.
I didn't think so.
No, he did not. But for the sake of our network,
the FCC not coming down,
I will not be
down and shutting us up.
I will not be adding a tally to the wall today. So another thing he said, I hate wasted reps. Said it multiple times as well. Always got to make sure you get take advantage of the limited practice time that you get throughout the week. So you can't be wasting reps on Kirby Smart's football field. Now, this was my absolute favorite one of the day, and I don't know who Ike is. Can't really figure it out. Kirby has a guess on who he thinks it might be because there's not really a whole lot of options of who it could be. But this was happening as I was leaving the practice field. I was running back to my car because I was trying to get my laptop out in my car, put up practice notes on our website, and then hit the road and come back to the studio. So I'm booking it. But as I'm leaving, I hear Kirby Smart just chewing out somebody, saying, Ike's always in the wrong line, always getting the wrong lines. He just likes to be wrong, I guess. Obviously, this has been something that's happened the last 2 practices. I can't get it right. And Kirby Smart proceeds to say, I guess I'm going to start calling you I can't get right. Don't know who Ike is, but Ike better get his butt into shape and start figuring out what line to get in.
How do you come up with such a fire nickname like that? Kirby Smart honestly might have a career in comedy if this coaching thing doesn't work out for him.
I guess. Man,
I've got a couple of those too, because if you're a college student at the University of Georgia listening to this, from about 3 to 5 p.m., if your route to wherever you stay or wherever you're going is anywhere near Stedman Coliseum, just walk in between that and the practice facility and you will hear Kirby Smart chewing some ass out. I got some notes on some people who have been recording things as well. One of my favorite was, and I don't know who he specifically said this to, you made a 31 on your ACT and you couldn't cover the flat. First of all,
remembers the ACT score.
Not even that. Who's making 31s on the ACT? Like, that's a high-ass score. That's got, like... Good Lord. Props to you, young man.
Definitely an academic scholarship guy, maybe.
Gotta be.
Like you scoring a 31 on the ACT, definitely academic scholarship.
That's crazy. Next one. How the hell do we overthrow a 6'8" man?
Elias Williams reference.
Probably, yeah.
That's a good question. How do we overthrow that man?
Question is, who was the quarterback? Maybe it was Gunnar Stockton. Maybe we need to see Ryan Puglisi.
Coulter Ginn?
No, Coulter Ginn's not overthrowing.
He's not overthrowing anybody. He's dialed in.
This one's my favorite. Hey, Q. Remember when you were fast and athletic? Yeah, me too. So, sounds like
that could honestly be... Obviously, it wouldn't be saying that about Ryan Montgomery because he's still recovering from the knee.
I'm going to say it's Quintavious Johnson, maybe.
Ooh, that's a good...
Maybe, Q, Quintavious. Yeah. Also, I think Ike might be Darren Ikenogman.
You know, that's probably the best guess because there's not a lot of those. We
scoured the roster, and there's no one else on that roster that has an IK in their name anywhere.
Yeah,
so no. There's obviously not an Ike.
Unless there's a middle name, nickname that he's going by. But Q is definitely Quintavious now that you mentioned that. That makes complete sense. But man, Kirby Smart hot mic moments. It means we're back. It means football is back. It brings some goodness to my soul. You got anything else?
This is I'm just saying, like, this is one of the best and worst parts of the year because the excitement is starting to build up. It's getting warm outside. We're getting real life practice notes. We're getting real life media availabilities. The recruiting world is kind of simmered down. It's less about that and it's more about focusing on playing in this season. But that also comes to be the worst part because then you do that and you go, oh, we're still 5 months away, almost half a year out. So it's a blessing and a curse to be this time of year. I'm really glad we're here now because, you know, the winter months of when the Super Bowl ends and it's like, all we have is like mid-regular season basketball. Yuck. So I'm glad we're here now, but don't look at me like that, dude. Come on. How many regular season games you
made through the whole show, and now you take a shot?
I take a shot at you. I took a shot at basketball, dude.
That's a personal shot, man.
You are paid to talk about football. You could have gone to a basketball career. Chose not. Why not?
I love football.
Exactly. Thank you. We all love football. Brooks loves football. He'll be back on Monday, I'm pretty sure. Right?
Yeah, I believe so. We should have all 3 guys back in the studio. Hopefully. You know, you said off-season, bad time to be a college football fan. Not a bad time if you're listening to this network because we are bringing consistent content. Even if the boss man isn't in-house, we're still bringing you content, still bringing you practice notes, still bringing you pro day notes, all the good stuff around Georgia football and college football. Anything else you want to add, Kirby?
Make sure you like. No, dude, come on. Make sure you like this video, subscribe. If you're new to this channel, there's another guy that's here. He's actually our boss. He kind of is the one who tells us what to do. His name's on the wall. His name's Brooke Austin. He's the film guy. He does a lot of really good recruiting work. Does a lot of really good film breakdowns. Probably has already done a film breakdown for your favorite team. So just go ahead and hit the subscribe button. It's not going to hurt you.
You won't regret it one bit. As we said, we'll be back next week with all 3 of us in the studio. Until then.